One clean execution. That is all Lord Varric Sorn thinks it takes to end the most dangerous necromancer in the kingdom. At midnight, Corvin Vale kneels beneath the execution bell with both hands chained behind his back, surrounded by priests, soldiers, and 7 very relieved conspirators. At midnight and 1 minute, the axe takes his head off. See, Corvin is not some wild grave robber dragged out of a cemetery with bones in his pockets. Until 3 days ago, he is the Crown's official mortuary strategist, the man responsible for turning enemy casualties into disposable soldiers during the 20-year war along the Ash March. In this kingdom, necromancy is legal when the Crown needs it, and unforgivable the second powerful people become afraid of the man performing it. Corvin learns that distinction rather late. Lord Varric stands beyond the execution circle in an immaculate black coat, careful not to let corpse dust touch his boots. Beside him waits Saint Marshal Alira Dane, commander of the Radiant Host and supposedly the kingdom's greatest protector against forbidden magic. Neither looks particularly worried. Why would they? The execution chamber beneath St. Ordon's cathedral is specifically built to erase people like Corvin. Sun brass bells hang from iron beams overhead. Every strike sends a sterilizing vibration through the stone, disrupting mana channels and severing soul contracts. Salt made from cremated mage bones fills the grooves around the platform. Even the walls are packed with white limestone because ordinary grave soil can hold lingering death energy. This place does not merely kill necromancers, it makes absolutely certain they stay killed. Or at least, that is what the architects believed. Varric steps closer before the executioner raises his axe. His smile is small. Satisfied. Look at you, he says. All those corpses, all those victories, all that power, and the moment your mana is sealed, there is nothing left. Corvin watches him without answering. The chains around his wrists are etched with suppression script. His mana core has already been punctured. 3 separate priests confirmed it. Every contract with his undead army is supposedly gone. Varric enjoys the silence enough to lean closer. A necromancer without a pulse is just a corpse waiting to rot. That sentence earns him exactly nothing. Corvin simply lowers his eyes toward the execution platform. Not in defeat, he is looking at the wood. There is a mark carved beneath the dried blood near his knee, a circle crossed by 3 downward lines, almost invisible beneath centuries of executions. Corvin has seen that symbol once before, not in a royal archive, not in any approved grimoire. It appeared in the margin of a funerary equation he recovered from a battlefield so old that even the bones had turned black. Interesting. The bell rings. The axe falls. Darkness lasts less than a heartbeat. Then something changes. Corvin has spent his entire life directing death from the outside. He uses mana to seize dead tissue, bind residual instinct, preserve decaying nerves, and force the remains to accept a second command structure. It is expensive, complicated, limited. A living necromancer is still a living mage after all. Mana goes down, the body gets tired. Wounds matter, poison matters, sleep matters. Destroy the caster, and the army eventually collapses. That is the rule everyone knows. Corvin's execution removes the last part of that equation. His heart stops, his mana core dies, his nerves go silent, his lungs become irrelevant. And somewhere in the instant between a living necromancer dying and a corpse being created, the entire structure of his magic turns inside out. The interface behind his dead eyes stirs. No mana source remains, no living vessel remains, no biological restrictions remain. Yet the necromantic authority is still there. Worse, it is no longer attached to a living mage. It is attached to the dead thing itself. A quiet readout forms through the darkness: condition recognized, caster status deceased, necromantic sovereignty retained. Then another line appears, undead classification accepted. And one final conclusion settles into place with almost insulting simplicity. Resource requirement, none. Corvin's severed head opens its eyes. The executioner sees it first. The man makes a sound that barely qualifies as human. His axe slips from both hands. Corvin does not gasp. There is nothing to inhale. He does not panic. There is no adrenaline left to produce. Fear requires a living nervous system. Shock requires hormones. Pain requires functioning nerves. All 3 have become someone else's problem. His head turns slightly on the blood-darkened boards. Lord Varric is already leaving. Of course he is. The man wanted confirmation of death, and an entire cathedral just gave it to him. Saint Marshal Alira remains for another few seconds while the priests begin the ritual burning. None of them notices Corvin watching. The first priest pours sanctified oil over the body. The second begins chanting. The third reaches for the head. Corvin gives his first command as a dead man. The corpse behind the third priest moves, not Corvin's corpse. Another one. The execution chamber has been used for 300 years, And limestone does not erase history nearly as well as priests like to claim. A finger punches through the mortar between two floor stones, then another. The priest freezes. A gray hand bursts upward and catches his ankle. He screams. The entire chamber detonates into chaos. Old bones push through sealed burial channels. Fingernails scrape from inside walls. A jawbone drops from the ceiling after centuries packed between support beams. No mana pulse announces the spell. No casting circle appears. There is nothing to suppress. Corvin is not spending energy. He is issuing ownership. Every corpse within his awareness feels as natural to him as moving a finger once did. The priests ring the sunbrass bell again. Nothing happens. They ring it harder. Still, nothing. Honestly, that is where the situation becomes extremely unfortunate for everyone except the dead man on the floor. The bell was designed to disrupt mana. Corvin no longer has any. One of the soldiers swings his sword into a half-formed corpse crawling through the wall. The blade cleaves its skull. Corvin simply raises it again. Another soldier stamps on a skeletal wrist. 3 more hands emerge beneath him. The chamber was built to prevent resurrection. Instead, centuries of executions have turned it into a warehouse. Corvin's body sits up. Slowly. His severed neck leaks almost no blood now. The heart has stopped pumping. A pair of dead attendants crawl from beneath the platform and retrieve his head with unsettling care. One places it against the neck. Black threads spread through the cut. Not flesh, not healing magic. Necrotic fibers stitch bone to bone, vessel to vessel, nerve to useless nerve. There is no need for perfection. He only restores structure. The head locks into place. Corvin stands. His ruined ceremonial shirt hangs open around the wound where royal inquisitors pierced his mana core. He touches the hole once. Nothing. No pain. No weakness. No loss of function. The dead necromancer looks down at the injury like a craftsman, inspecting damage to a tool that no longer serves any purpose. Then the obituary ledger opens inside his mind. Corvin created the original ledger years ago as a memory aid, a necromantic indexing spell capable of recording corpse signatures, names, death conditions, and unfinished contracts. It used to require mana. Now the spell has changed with him. Most of its pages are black. Only one is readable. 1 page. 7 names. Lord Varric Sorn, Saint Marshal Alira Dane, High Treasurer Bram Kest, Court Magister Othric Pell, Duke Renwald Tain, Inquisitor Selka IV, Royal Secretary Joran Voss. No emotion rises when Corvin reads them. No rage. No grief. No satisfaction. Those things died with the rest of his biology. But memory remains perfectly intact. So does judgment. Each person on that page performed a specific action during the last 3 days. Varric fabricated correspondence proving Corvin planned a military coup. Alira ordered the Radiant Host to slaughter his bound undead before the tribunal could inspect them. Bram froze the pensions promised to the families of Corvin's dead soldiers. Othric altered the royal mana records. Renwald supplied false witnesses. Selka conducted the torture. Joran forged the king's seal. 7 names, 7 unfinished matters. The ledger does not ask what Corvin feels about them. It simply keeps the record. A movement near the execution block catches his attention. The executioner is trying to crawl away. Meet Garen Rusk, a cathedral headsman who has spent 16 years separating condemned people from their futures. Tonight, he makes the unfortunate professional mistake of successfully executing the wrong man. Rusk drags himself toward the stairwell. His leg is broken from the first corpse attack. Blood smears across the stone behind him. Corvin watches. The headsman looks back. Their eyes meet. Rusk starts begging. Corvin barely listens. The dead no longer have much use for apologies offered purely because the speaker is losing blood. Then something small happens. Rusk reaches the doorway and stops, not because Corvin commands him. Because 3 terrified altar boys are trapped behind an overturned incense cabinet. One of the newly risen corpses is crawling toward them. Rusk could keep moving. Instead, the executioner grabs the fallen axe and swings. He crushes the corpse's skull. The children run. Rusk loses his balance. Another dead hand catches him across the throat. By the time Corvin reaches the doorway, Garen Rusk is already dying. Curious, the man helped kill him. The same man just spent his final useful movement protecting children who had nothing to offer him. Human beings remain annoyingly inconsistent even at the edge of death. Rusk's breathing stops. Corvin raises 1 finger. The corpse twitches. But he does not restore the man as an ordinary undead. Something resists. A fragment of will clings to the body. Tiny, cracked. Incomplete. The obituary ledger turns its single readable page. A second entry forces itself into the margin-compatible, retained ego detected, binding stability extremely low. Corvin considers this for half a second. Then he closes his hand. Rusk rises. His eyes remain dark, but a thin silver ring surrounds each pupil. He does not speak. He cannot. The throat is destroyed. Yet when Corvin turns toward the deeper crypt, Rusk picks up the execution axe and follows without being ordered again. That is new. Useful, potentially dangerous. Corvin keeps him anyway. A necromancer who has already died can afford to be patient with unusual results. Above them, cathedral alarms begin screaming. Soldiers flood the upper halls. Priests shout that the execution chamber has been breached. Someone finally notices the suppression bells are ringing against something they cannot suppress. Corvin walks deeper instead of upward. Running from the cathedral would be easy. He could raise enough corpses to bury the entire district before sunrise. That would also be stupid. Varric believes the threat is gone. Alira believes the contracts are broken. The remaining 5 names believe Corvin Vale is cooling on an execution table beneath several tons of holy stone. Correcting them tonight would waste an extraordinary advantage, so the dead necromancer leaves the living world exactly what it wants. A corpse. More specifically, his corpse. He stops beside an ancient storage vault and removes 3 bones from an unmarked prisoner buried in the wall. Rusk watches silently. Corvin strips his own execution shirt. He wraps the old bones inside it. Then he takes a preserved skull from a burial niche and reconstructs just enough tissue over the face to resemble himself after burning. It is ugly, crude, convincing once fire gets involved. Our necromancer returns to the chamber through a service passage while the soldiers are still fighting his disposable dead. He places the false body beneath the collapsed execution platform. Then he reaches toward the spilled sanctified oil. A dead priest crawls forward and strikes a lantern against the wood. Flames erupt. Perfect. By the time the cathedral retakes the room, there will be 1 burned corpse wearing Corvin's clothes, fragments of his blood everywhere, and enough damaged remains to support whatever explanation the investigators desperately want to believe. Rusk stands near the hidden passage. The silent undead executioner tilts his head toward the platform. Corvin notices the ancient symbol again. The circle. 3 descending lines. This time, blood has filled the carving. For less than a second, the symbol moves. Not glows. Moves. The 3 lines bend toward Corvin like iron filings toward a magnet. Then they become still. He cuts the entire marked piece of wood from the platform and takes it with him. No speculation. No dramatic reaction. Unknown information gets preserved first and understood later. That rule served him while alive. There is no reason to abandon it after death. The 2 undead descend beneath St. Ordan's cathedral through tunnels even the priests no longer remember. Corpse salt crystals crunch beneath Corvin's boots. Black underground water runs between burial shelves. Every few steps, another forgotten dead thing turns its head as he passes. He does not raise them. Not yet. Power without timing is noise, and tonight is not about making noise. Tonight is about confirming whether eternity changes the scale of a plan. The obituary ledger opens again. 7 names wait on the page. Corvin studies the first. Lord Varric Sorn. The man who stood close enough to watch the axe fall. The man who believed death reduced a necromancer to nothing. The man who left the cathedral before the corpse opened its eyes. Corvin reaches a fork in the tunnel. One path leads outside the city. The other leads beneath the noble quarter. He turns toward the second. Rusk follows, dragging the execution axe across stone. Sparks flicker behind them. Several buried corpses stir inside the walls. Corvin keeps walking. There is no anger in his face, no hatred in his chest. There is not even a heartbeat. Only memory, calculation, and 7 names arranged in perfect order. Lord Varric wanted the necromancer dead. He got exactly what he asked for. Corvin reaches the first sealed gate beneath the noble quarter, places one dead hand against the lock, and raises every corpse buried on the other side. The dead beneath the noble quarter have been waiting longer than Lord Varric Sorn has been alive. Corvin discovers that within 10 minutes, behind the sealed gate lies an underground burial artery running beneath half the eastern district, narrow stone corridors where aristocratic families, quietly stored servants, illegitimate relatives, executed retainers, and anyone else too inconvenient for a respectable cemetery. The city records call these tunnels empty. The city records are lying. Corvin presses one hand against the iron gate. On the other side, hundreds of dead signatures answer. Not voices, not souls begging for release. Necromancy is considerably less poetic than priests make it sound. What Corvin feels is structure, bone density, remaining tissue, old nerve pathways, fragments of physical memory locked inside dead muscle. Every corpse carries information about what it used to be. A soldier's shoulders remember formation drills. A locksmith's fingers remember tension. A swordsman's wrists preserve movements repeated 10,000 times. While alive, Corvin had to spend mana forcing a corpse to obey those remnants, Now he simply connects to them, no expenditure, no fatigue, no resistance. The dead recognize him as one of their own. The gate unlocks from the opposite side. A skeletal hand withdraws from the mechanism. Corvin steps through. Rusk follows. The undead executioner moves more smoothly than before. His broken leg no longer drags. Corvin repaired the shattered bone while walking, replacing 2 missing fragments with pieces taken from an older corpse. The result should not work. The donor is a different age, different build, different bloodline. None of that matters anymore. Living bodies reject foreign tissue because living systems protect themselves. Dead bodies have no immune response. For someone who specializes in rearranging corpses, that is almost embarrassingly convenient. Corvin stops beside a burial niche. Rusk stops with him. The silver rings around the executioner's pupils tighten. Interesting. The man is learning without instruction. Corvin removes a rusted knife from the niche and tosses it toward him. Rusk catches it. His fingers shift instantly. Wrong grip for an axe. Perfect grip for a butcher's knife. Corvin watches the wrist angle. Then he looks toward the corpse inside the niche. A butcher. Dead for approximately 80 years. Rusk glances at the corpse, then at the knife. He repeats a cutting motion, far too precise for an executioner, so retained ego is not the only anomaly. Contact with objects carrying dense death residue lets Rusk borrow fragments of motor memory from corpses connected to them. Not skills in the magical sense, physical habits, muscle patterns, instinct preserved after death. A quiet line forms inside Corvin's awareness, subordinate adaptation detected, mnemonic assimilation unstable. Rusk looks toward him. Corvin takes the knife back. Again later, the executioner gives a single nod. That is the first command he understands without necromantic compulsion. Progress. The pair continues east. Above them, noble estates sleep behind walls, iron lamps, private guards, and money powerful enough to make murder look administrative. Beneath them, Corvin begins building an army nobody knows exists, not an army in the traditional sense. Thousands of corpses marching through streets would be dramatic. It would also be idiotic. Corvin needs eyes, hands, access, so he raises selectively. A dead chimney cleaner beneath House Marrow, a maid buried beneath the old Sorn kitchens, 2 former city inspectors sealed inside a collapsed maintenance chamber, a courier whose skeleton still carries the brass identification tag issued by the royal post, a locksmith, 3 sewer workers, 1 undertaker. None emerges from the ground. That would leave evidence. Corvin wakes them where they are and sends them through forgotten crawl spaces, drainage shafts, wall cavities, cellar gaps, and disused servant tunnels. A living spy needs food, sleep, payment, loyalty. An undead spy needs a route. Within an hour, Corvin possesses access to 11 noble cellars. Within 17. Before dawn, dead fingers are opening desks across the eastern quarter while their owners sleep directly above them. The information arrives through contact, not sight exactly, more like pressure against his awareness. A servant corpse touches a document. Corvin feels the shape. The ink does not automatically become knowledge. He still needs eyes for that, so he sends intact dead where possible. A century-old house steward peers through a crack in a cellar ceiling, while Varric's current servants unload sealed crates. Corvin receives the image in broken flashes. Blue wax, military inventory stamps. 4 armed men, 1 crate marked for battlefield remains. That deserves attention. Varric apparently begins moving quickly after Corvin's execution. Predictable. Remove the kingdom's chief necromancer. Then acquire everything he controlled. Humans frequently disguise appetite as policy. Corvin changes direction. Rusk follows through a narrow passage beneath Sorn Manor. The estate above is massive. White stone. 3 courtyards. Private chapel. 24 guards on the night rotation. 7 magical wards around the primary residence. Corvin knows because he helped redesign 2 of them during the war. The irony is almost efficient. He does not attack. Instead, he enters the Sorn family crypt. The lock is ancient. The corpse of the locksmith makes short work of it. Inside rest 6 generations of Varric's ancestors. Polished sarcophagi line the chamber. Silver masks cover noble faces that have not needed faces in decades. Their jewelry alone could feed a village through winter. Corvin ignores it. He is looking for paperwork. Nobility keeps records near the dead because apparently tax disputes survive longer than grief. Behind the 5th sarcophagus, a concealed cabinet holds land charters, inheritance declarations, wartime exemptions, and private burial rights. Rusk pries it open. Corvin searches. There. A transfer deed signed 6 months ago. Sorn Holdings has purchased burial authority over a narrow strip of the Ash March. Cheap land. Worthless land, unless someone knows what lies beneath it. Corvin does. During the war, 3 battlefield ossuaries were constructed there. 2 are empty. The third was never officially opened. The ninth ossuary. Inside it remained the bodies of nearly 12,000 soldiers from the final winter campaign, unraised, unclaimed, preserved by cold mineral clay, an absurd necromantic resource. Varric does not know the full truth, but he clearly knows enough to purchase the ground before Corvin's body is even cold. That means someone informed him. Corvin places the deed back exactly where he found it. Then he opens the obituary ledger. Varric's name remains first. A smaller notation appears beneath it. Current objective: acquisition of restricted military dead. Useful. Corvin closes the ledger. He now understands what bait Varric wants. All that remains is making sure the man believes he found it himself. The trap begins with a dead clerk. 2 streets away, beneath the former Ministry of War annex, rests a records officer who died during a winter fever 8 years ago. Corvin reaches the body through an old drainage shaft. The uniform has mostly rotted, the memory pattern has not. The clerk's fingers still remember military filing codes. Corvin places paper beneath them, ink beside them. Then he lets the corpse write, slowly, painfully, accurately. An obsolete transfer authorization takes shape. The document references the 9th ossuary. It includes 3 genuine archive numbers, 1 decommissioned cipher, a real burial engineer's signature reconstructed from muscle memory, and 1 deliberately false line. Emergency authority transferred to Necromancer Command in the event of royal succession instability. Varric will love that. The implication is obvious. Corvin supposedly maintained a hidden legal mechanism granting himself control over 12,000 military corpses. A paranoid lord who just executed him will interpret the document exactly one way. There must be a backup protocol. Perhaps an apprentice, perhaps a surviving officer, perhaps some automated undead command. Whatever Varric imagines, he will need to investigate. And men investigating secret military graves tend to bring money, troops, equipment, documents, and superiors. Corvin wants all 4. He folds the authorization, but planting forged evidence directly in Varric's office would be too clean, suspiciously clean. So he damages it, burns 1 corner, adds grave soil beneath the wax, lets the dead clerk leave a dried blood smear from fingers that have not contained blood in years. Then he places the paper inside the satchel of the undead royal courier. The courier climbs towards street level, not to Sorn Manor, to a warehouse belonging to one of Varric's lesser agents. That distinction matters. A secret discovered through subordinates feels more trustworthy than a secret delivered to the front door. Corvin sends the courier through a route monitored by living smugglers. The corpse is instructed to let itself be seen once, only once, then disappear into the old canal tunnel. Someone will report it. Someone will search the tunnel. Someone will find the satchel. The rest will happen naturally. Rusk observes the preparation. Then he taps the forged document. Corvin looks at him. The executioner points toward the burial authorization, then toward the city above, then makes a slow closing motion with his fist. A question. Trap? Corvin nods. Rusk's ruined mouth twitches. Not a smile. The dead throat cannot support one properly. Still, the expression is close enough. Curious again. Emotion should be impossible for Corvin. Rusk clearly retained something. That difference may become useful later. They leave the ministry annex before sunrise. Corvin takes another route toward the old municipal morgue. The building has been abandoned for nearly 15 years after the city constructed a cleaner facility closer to the river. Cleaner, in this case, means fewer rats. The underground cold rooms remain, hundreds of iron drawers, dozens still occupied. Corvin stands in the central corridor. This becomes his first base. No throne, no dramatic crypt. Just tile walls, drainage channels, rusted tables, and enough preserved cadavers to operate without attracting attention. Perfect. Our dead mage begins working. He needs more than servants. He needs specialized units. Living necromancers usually prioritize powerful bodies, knights, beasts, mages. Corvin now sees the flaw in that approach. A corpse's value is not simply combat potential. It is retained function. He categorizes them. Hands suited for lock mechanisms, eyes preserved well enough for surveillance, bodies small enough for ventilation shafts. Former guards with memorized patrol movements. Porters with reinforced joints. Messengers. Craftsmen. Mortuary workers. By morning, 28 corpses stand in the old morgue. Not one looks impressive. That is exactly why nobody will notice them. Corvin tests his new authority. He orders all 28 to lift their right hands. They do, instantly. No delay between command and movement. He sends half of them 3 streets away. The connection remains. 5 streets, still stable. 10, stable. Beyond the river, stable. There is no detectable mana thread connecting master and corpse. The usual range limitation is gone. Distance no longer matters once a dead body has accepted his authority. That changes everything. Corvin adds another line to the internal model forming around his power. Initial binding requires awareness or direct contact with the corpse. After binding, command range appears unlimited. Information remains imperfect. He can order a corpse across the kingdom. He cannot magically know what waits behind every door. Power is infinite, knowledge is not. That means preparation still matters. Good. A plan requiring no thought would be boring even to a corpse. Rusk stands on one of the operating platforms. Corvin turns toward him. Your leg. Rusk steps forward. The replacement bone holds perfectly. Corvin places 3 objects on the table: the butcher's knife, a rusted cavalry saber, a length of execution chain. All 3 carry dense physical memories. Rusk touches the knife first. His stance changes. Quick wrist, short range. Economical cuts. Then the saber. His shoulders settle. One foot slides backward. The ruined executioner suddenly carries himself like a mounted soldier forced onto the ground. Finally, the chain. Rusk freezes. The silver rings in his eyes widen. Something deeper responds. The chain belonged to the cathedral. Thousands of prisoners wore it. Thousands struggled against it. Thousands died after touching it. Too much memory hits at once. Rusk's body convulses. His fingers lock around the links. The operating table cracks beneath his heel. Corvin takes hold of the chain. The overload spreads into him, not pain. Information, fragments, hands restrained behind backs. Boots on cathedral stone, priests chanting, execution orders, seals, faces. One image repeats more clearly than the others. 3 downward lines inside a circle. Corvin releases the chain. Rusk collapses onto one hand. Not from physical exhaustion. His retained ego is struggling to sort thousands of dead impressions. Corvin takes the chain away. Limit one memory source at a time. Rusk slowly rises. The silver around his pupils becomes brighter. His movements sharpen. The adaptation has stabilized. A new message forms quietly in Corvin's awareness, subordinate trait established. Grave memory. First stage. There it is. Rusk is no longer merely a raised executioner. He can absorb fragments of physical expertise through objects saturated with death. Weak for now, potentially absurd later, Corvin stores the chain. Chekhov can keep his weapon on the table a little longer. By late morning, the first reaction arrives. One of Corvin's dead spies lies inside a wall cavity beneath the warehouse where the courier's satchel was planted. Living footsteps rush overhead. A door slams. Someone shouts for lanterns. Then another voice. Lord Sorn needs to see this. Corvin receives the words through a corpse with one intact ear pressed against floorboards. Excellent. The trap has been touched. Not swallowed yet, but touched. He turns toward another work table and begins preparing the next layer. That is when the Undertaker corpse returns from Sorn territory carrying something Corvin did not request. A tiny piece of blue sealing wax. The corpse places it on the table. Corvin looks closer. The wax carries no Sorn crest. Instead, beneath the broken edge is a mark stamped so lightly most living eyes would miss it. A circle. 3 descending lines. The same symbol carved beneath his execution platform. The same symbol buried inside the death memories clinging to the cathedral chain. Now it appears on a private document inside Varric Sorn's estate. 3 occurrences are no longer coincidence. Corvin places the wax beside the carved piece of execution wood. Perfect match. Rusk looks between them. The executioner's hand tightens around his axe. Corvin feels nothing. No dread. No surprise. But the plan changes. Varric is still first on the list. That has not changed. What changes is the assumption that Varric sits at the top of anything. Corvin opens the obituary ledger. 7 names remain. He does not add an 8th. Not yet. Unknown enemies do not deserve names until they earn them. Instead, he places the blue wax inside a glass evidence jar. Then he sends 3 undead spies toward different ministries, 1 to military procurement, 1 to cathedral archives, 1 to the royal treasury, all searching for the same symbol. Above the abandoned morgue, the kingdom continues celebrating the death of its necromancer. Church bells ring at noon. Official notices declare the threat permanently eliminated. Lord Varric Sorn receives a damaged military document suggesting Corvin left behind one final secret at the Ash March. And beneath the city, 28 dead servants begin leaving through 28 different tunnels. Corvin watches the last one disappear. Then he places his finger on Varric's name in the obituary ledger. The list is long. Eternity is longer. For now, our undead necromancer has no reason to hurry. He closes the ledger, lifts the first map of the 9th ossuary onto the operating table, and starts deciding exactly how much of the truth Lord Varric is allowed to discover. Lord Varric Sorn sends 36 armed men into the Ash March to investigate a dead necromancer's secret. Only 9 return, and not one of them understands what actually happened. 3 days after Corvin Vale's execution, the ninth ossuary sits beneath a frozen basin 200 miles north of the capital, sealed behind military stone and enough old battlefield wards to make grave robbers reconsider their career choices. Varric's expedition reaches it shortly before dusk. 20 soldiers, 8 hired corpse breakers, 4 military engineers, 3 clerks, and Captain Merrick Dahl, a veteran officer whose loyalty depends heavily on whoever currently signs his bonus papers. The forged authorization Corvin planted has done exactly what it was supposed to do. Varric believes the ninth ossuary contains an emergency control mechanism left behind by the crown necromancer. He also believes Corvin is dead. That second belief is doing most of the heavy lifting. Corvin is already inside. He entered the ossuary the previous night through a drainage tunnel built beneath the original embalming chambers. Rusk stands beside him in darkness. The executioner now carries his axe across his back and the old cavalry saber at his hip. His movements have become smoother since learning to borrow grave memory, but the ability remains unstable. Too much residue at once still overloads him. Corvin considers that acceptable. Weaknesses are measurements. Measurements can be improved. Around them stretch 12,000 military dead, not stacked in piles. The ninth ossuary was built properly. Rows upon rows of stone recesses disappear through underground halls large enough to swallow cathedrals. Each soldier was catalogued. Rank, unit, cause of death, command history. Some still wear fragments of rusted armor. Others have weapons laid beside them. See, these men died during the final winter offensive at Greyhaven Ridge, where entire battalions froze faster than burial teams could process them. The Crown preserved the corpses because necromancers were supposed to raise them if the war ever reached the capital. The war ended first, then politics happened. The dead stayed underground. Corvin walks between the rows. He does not raise 12,000 soldiers. That would be excessive. Also visible. Instead, he touches only 43 scouts, shield infantry, 2 combat medics, 5 archers, a sapper, and 1 standard bearer whose skeleton still grips the iron pole of the 9th Regiment. Every corpse rises silently. No mana flare, no spell circle, no wave of death energy for surface mages to detect. The dead simply stop lying down. Corvin gives them one instruction: return to your old positions. That is where the experiment begins. Retained physical memory reacts immediately. Shield infantry form ranks without individual commands. Archers test decayed bowstrings. The sapper checks wall seams. 1 medic begins organizing bodies by injury type despite having no patients worth saving. Corvin watches everything. Useful. His new authority does not create intelligence. It uncovers preserved function. The distinction matters. A corpse cannot invent a strategy it never learned, but it can repeat something trained into the body thousands of times. That gives Corvin an idea, a dangerous one. He selects 1 shield soldier. The corpse steps forward. Its left arm is cracked at the elbow. Corvin repairs it using bone from another body. Then he places 1 hand against the soldier's skull. Instead of issuing a command, he pulls, not flesh, not soul, pattern. A faint sequence of battlefield movements enters his awareness. Brace, turn, absorb impact, shift weight, protect the left flank. Corvin releases the corpse. The pattern remains, barely. For less than 2 seconds, the dead mage's own body knows how the soldier used to fight. Then the imprint fades. Now that is interesting. Until this moment, Corvin has treated corpse memory as something his undead servants can access. Apparently, he can access it too. The limitation is immediate: 1 imprint, a few seconds. Physical patterns only. And the transferred motion is imperfect because Corvin's body has different proportions. Still, the principle is far more important than the result. If dead tissue stores trained movement, and Corvin possesses unrestricted authority over dead tissue, then memory itself may be another necromantic resource. He tests again. Archer, draw angle. Breathing rhythm is irrelevant now, which actually improves stability. Sapper, short hammer strike against a structural seam. Medic, fast knot around an arterial clamp. Each pattern arrives. Each fades. Corvin names the technique Grave Echo, not because it sounds impressive, because the obituary ledger requires indexing terms. He records the mechanism internally. Direct contact with a corpse allows temporary duplication of deeply trained physical patterns, duration extremely limited, complexity dependent on corpse preservation, no emotional memory, no strategic memory, no conscious identity. That is enough, for now. Footsteps echo from the upper access tunnel. Varric's expedition has arrived. Corvin sends the 43 corpses back into their recesses. Rusk disappears into a maintenance passage. The ossuary becomes still. Captain Merrick enters first. Torchlight spreads across the old military hall. His men follow with silver-edged weapons and portable purification lamps. One corpse breaker carries a hooked pole designed to dislocate undead spines. Another pushes a brass device mounted on wheels. Corvin recognizes it, a pulse brazier, modified cathedral technology. Burns concentrated solar salts to disrupt necromantic control. Merrick stops beneath the central arch. Search everything. The engineers separate. Clerks begin copying burial numbers. Corpse breakers watch the walls. Corvin observes through an undead scout hidden inside a sealed recess. The plan is simple. Let them find the forged trail. Let them report it. Let Varric commit more resources. Then use those resources to trace whoever supplied the blue seal. Simple plans rarely survive contact with human greed. Captain Merrick changes that within 17 minutes. One clerk discovers an old military vault. Inside it are genuine command rods used during the war to designate sections of the ossuary. The rods are useless without a necromancer. Merrick does not know that. He sees engraved silver. Military property, potential black market value. His expression changes immediately. He orders the clerks to stop recording. Then he sends 6 soldiers outside. Not to report. To bring wagons. Corvin adjusts. Merrick is not following Varric's investigation anymore. He is stealing from it. That creates a complication. Then one of the corpse breakers finds the false trail Corvin prepared. A small iron casket beneath the Western Archive table. Inside is a second document. This one references a non-existent control chamber deeper inside the ossuary. Merrick reads it. His greed upgrades into ambition. If there really is a method to command 12,000 dead soldiers, selling silver rods suddenly looks embarrassingly small. Seal the entrance, he orders. One engineer hesitates. Captain, Lord Sorn, commanded an immediate report if Merrick drives a knife through the man's throat. No warning, no argument. The engineer drops. Blood spills across the stone. Everyone freezes. Merrick wipes the blade on the dead man's coat. We found nothing yet. There it is. The first deviation. Not from remembered history, from predicted behavior. Corvin expected Varric's men to carry information upward. Instead, the expedition leader is trying to steal the prize before Varric ever sees it. The original trap depends on obedience. That assumption is now dead. Corvin recalibrates immediately. He no longer needs Merrick to deliver information. He needs Merrick alive long enough to expose who he contacts when he believes he has something valuable. The objective changes. Observe. Mark. Release. Then one corpse breaker ruins even that. The man notices the murdered engineer's blood flowing between floor stones. It reaches an old burial groove. A dead hand moves beneath the grate. The corpse breaker reacts instantly. His hooked pole slams downward. Bone cracks. Undead. The pulse brazier ignites. Golden white light erupts through the chamber. The air vibrates. Every ordinary corpse Corvin raised collapses. 43 bodies drop inside their recesses. Merrick draws his sword. The corpse breakers spread out. The solar pulse repeats. Nothing happens to Corvin. Of course it does not. The device attacks mana links. He has none, but pretending otherwise would be useful. Corvin lets the scout corpse inside the wall fall completely still. Merrick sees it. Relief appears. Good. The brazier works. Technically true, just not against the problem that matters. The soldiers advance deeper. Corvin moves through the lower passage, keeping himself outside torchlight. He could kill everyone immediately. That would waste the first proper field test of his new condition. So he allows the expedition to push forward until the narrowest point of the ossuary. A bridge of stone crosses the embalming trench below. Only 4 people can stand abreast. Perfect terrain. The first attack comes from Merrick, not Corvin. The captain orders 2 corpse breakers forward. One carries the pulse brazier. The other raises a sanctified maul. They reach the center of the bridge. Corvin steps into view. For 3 full seconds, nobody understands what they are seeing. His execution wound is still visible around the neck. Skin pale. Eyes dark. No breath misting in the frozen chamber. No pulse. No mana signature. One clerk recognizes him first. The man's parchment falls from his hands. Vale. Merrick stares. Corvin walks another step. The captain looks at the pulse brazier, then at the severed scar, then back at Corvin. This is impossible. Corvin does not bother correcting him. The corpse breaker fires the brazier at full output. Radiant force slams across the bridge. Corvin takes it directly. His coat snaps backward. Dust explodes from the walls. The pulse washes over him. Nothing else happens. The corpse breaker's confidence disappears. Corvin continues walking. Then the sanctified maul hits him in the chest. Hard. The impact caves in 3 ribs and launches him backward into a stone pillar. That part works considerably better. No mana weakness does not mean momentum stopped existing. The soldiers see Corvin hit the floor. Merrick reacts immediately. Break the body. 6 men rush him. This is the first stage. Receive the blow. Corvin rises with one side of his chest visibly collapsed. No pain, no breathing difficulty, no shock, but structural damage still affects movement. His right shoulder responds 11% slower. Useful measurement. A sword cuts through his forearm. Another soldier drives a spear through his abdomen. A corpse breaker smashes his knee sideways. Corvin allows all three, not because he enjoys being hit. Enjoyment is unavailable. He is reading them. Second stage. Observe. The pulse brazier requires 4 seconds between bursts. The maul wielder plants his rear foot before every heavy strike. Merrick stays 6 paces behind the front line. The soldiers rotate around the brazier, protecting it instinctively. Most importantly, every man here has already killed people. That means their weapons are carrying death residue. Corvin notices it the second a sword enters his body. Fragments cling to the steel. Old fights. Old motions. Old dead. His hand closes around the blade lodged through his abdomen. Grave echo activates. A swordsman's pattern enters him, not the current soldiers. Someone this blade killed years ago. A duelist. 3-step advance. Inside turn. Wrist cut. The imprint lasts barely a heartbeat. Corvin uses it immediately. Third stage. Ignition. He twists. The soldier loses his sword. Corvin steps inside the formation using a dead duelist's footwork and drives the stolen blade through the pulse brazier's fuel valve. Solar salt sprays across the bridge. The machine explodes. Golden flame engulfs him. His skin blackens. Half his coat disappears. The living soldiers scream and retreat from the heat. Corvin walks out of it, burning, still moving. The obituary ledger records grave echo compatibility with death-saturated weapons. Good. Very good. The maul wielder charges. Corvin touches the weapon during the swing. Another imprint enters him. A siege fighter. Weight transfer. Downward rotation. Shoulder alignment. He copies the motion and redirects the maul into the bridge. Stone fractures. The corpse breaker falls through. Then Rusk arrives. A chain snaps from the darkness and wraps around a soldier's throat. Rusk yanks him backward. The executioner drops from the maintenance ledge, cavalry saber already moving. His first cut is clumsy. His second is not. The blade touches a corpse breaker's hooked pole stained with years of undead remains. Grave memory activates. Rusk's stance shifts. He suddenly understands the exact tool designed to destroy creatures like himself, and turns that knowledge against its owner. Hook low, twist, dislocate, pull. The corpse breaker crashes face first onto stone. Rusk buries the execution axe beside his head, deliberately missing. The man freezes. That decision is entirely Rusk's. Corvin notices. Retained judgment is increasing. Again, useful. Merrick sees the formation collapse. He runs, exactly as Corvin now wants. But 3 soldiers block the captain's retreat in panic. Corvin raises one hand. The 43 military corpses inside the walls stand again. The radiant suppression field is gone. Old shields slam into position. Archers emerge from burial rows. The 9th Regiment reforms for the first time since death. Not 12,000. 43, more than enough. Merrick turns pale. Corvin gives no speech, no threat. He simply points toward the surviving expedition members. The dead attack. 4th stage. Consequence. Shield soldiers break the living formation. Archers pin weapons to walls instead of aiming for hearts. The sapper collapses one side passage and removes the enemy's escape options. Combat medics seize the wounded and restrain them with embalming straps. The entire engagement ends in less than a minute. 36 entered the ossuary. 9 remain capable of walking. Corvin deliberately leaves Captain Merrick among them. The others believe they escaped through luck. They do not see the skeletal scout crawl beneath their supply wagon. They do not notice the dead courier attach itself beneath the rear axle. And none of them feels the tiny necrotic fragment Corvin places inside Merrick's shattered shoulder while repairing it just enough to keep him mobile. Not a curse. Not a spell. A piece of dead tissue. His tissue, bound to Corvin's authority, a marker. For the first time, Corvin no longer needs a corpse near the target to follow him. He can carry the dead into the living. The possibility opens quietly. Grave echo lets him borrow death's memory. Necrotic mark may let him extend death's presence. Both are crude, both are incomplete, both will matter later. Merrick and 8 survivors flee south before midnight. Rusk watches them leave. Then he points his saber after the captain. Questioning, why spare him? Corvin turns toward the broken pulse brazier. On its brass underside sits a supplier's stamp hidden beneath military paint. Blue wax has melted into the hinge. A circle. 3 descending lines, the same mark again. Corvin removes the brass plate. Now the expedition has given him something better than another corpse. A route. Someone supplied Varric with cathedral-grade anti-necromancy equipment. Someone associated with the same symbol beneath the execution platform. Someone expects to profit from what Varric is doing. Corvin places the plate inside his coat. Then he looks toward the 12,000 dead soldiers surrounding him. The ninth ossuary is no longer merely bait. It is infrastructure. He leaves almost all of them sleeping. Only 43 remain active. Rusk walks beside him toward the lower command chamber. Behind them, the surviving undead restore damaged burial rows with mechanical precision. The kingdom will soon hear a distorted version of what happened here. A dead necromancer. An impossible failure of suppression technology. A military unit almost erased. That is enough to create a rumor. Not enough to reveal the truth. Perfect. Corvin opens the obituary ledger. Lord Varric Sorn remains first. But beside the name, a new line forms. External supplier confirmed. Identity unresolved. Corvin closes the page. Then he lays Merrick's escape route across a military map and places one black marker on the first road leading south. The captain thinks he survived the ninth ossuary. In reality, he has just become the first living courier in Corvin Vale's service. Captain Merrick Dahl reaches the capital believing he has escaped a massacre. By sunset, Corvin Vale knows which tavern he enters, which physician stitches his shoulder, which messenger he pays, and exactly how many times he lies about what happened inside the ninth ossuary. Merrick does not realize a fragment of dead tissue is still buried beneath his collarbone. That tiny piece changes everything. Corvin stands beneath the abandoned municipal morgue with one hand resting on an operating table. His eyes are closed. Not because concentration requires it. The dead do not get headaches. It simply removes irrelevant visual information. Through the necrotic fragment inside Merrick, Corvin receives almost nothing at first. Pressure, movement, temperature shifts, the vibration of footsteps through living bone. No thoughts, no sight, no hearing. Necrotic mark is not surveillance. Not yet. It is presence. A dead foothold carried inside a living body. Corvin tests the range. Merrick is already several districts away. Connection stable. The captain enters a building. Stable. He crosses running water. Stable. A cathedral bell rings nearby. The mark flickers. Then holds. Interesting. Sunbrass interference still affects bound dead matter slightly, even if it cannot sever Corvin's control. Useful limitation. Corvin records it. Rusk stands across the room. The executioner is repairing his own coat. Poorly. The man has threaded a curved embalming needle through black cloth and is attempting to imitate a tailor whose bones Corvin recovered that morning. Grave memory gives him the movement. It does not give him taste. The sleeve ends up attached at an angle. Rusk studies it, then tears the entire section off. Corvin watches. The executioner looks toward him. Corvin says nothing. Rusk retrieves another piece of cloth. Tries again. There is something almost stubborn about the process. That quality definitely did not come from necromantic programming. Corvin leaves him to it. Around them, the morgue no longer looks abandoned. 40 work tables have been restored. 6 cold rooms are active. 3 underground passages now connect the building to the drainage network. The walls contain hidden compartments filled with forged uniforms, tools, seals, maps, and corpse identification tags. 112 undead operate within the capital. Only 8 are combat capable. The rest are more valuable. 14 inspect sewers. 11 monitor warehouses. 7 move sealed messages. 23 remain hidden inside noble estates. 9 operate beneath government buildings. The others repair tunnels, transport equipment, sort records, and retrieve forgotten bodies from places living authorities stopped checking decades ago. Corvin does not call them an army. An army announces itself. This is an infrastructure. An infrastructure wins wars long before soldiers arrive. A dead clerk enters the morgue carrying a leather folio. Corvin opens it. Military procurement reports. The supplier stamp from the broken pulse brazier appears twice. Both shipments were purchased through intermediaries. One delivered to the Radiant Host, one to Sorn Holdings. The listed manufacturer does not exist. The payment route does. 3 shell merchants, 2 banking houses, 1 charitable foundation. All the money eventually passes through the royal treasury. High Treasurer Bram Kest, 3rd name on the obituary ledger. That earns attention. Corvin sets the folio aside. Not yet. Varric remains first. Order matters, especially when the people on the list are connected. A dead messenger taps twice against the wall. That signal means Merrick has stopped moving. Corvin returns his attention to the mark. The captain is inside a reinforced structure now. The fragment feels pressure from surrounding wards. Then something sharp passes across it. A scanning spell. Merrick is being checked. Corvin withdraws active control instantly. The necrotic tissue becomes inert. To any examiner, it is simply dead flesh trapped inside a badly healed wound. That is exactly what happens. Several minutes later, the connection returns. Still unnoticed, Corvin sends an undead spy toward Merrick's location. The address becomes clear within the hour. Sorn Manor. Excellent. Merrick enters through the east service gate instead of the main entrance. Varric does not want anyone seeing him. That means the captain's survival has become politically inconvenient. Corvin already expects the next move. He sends 3 dead servants into the walls around Varric's private study. One has an intact eye, another has both ears. The third is only a hand. The hand turns out to be the most useful. Varric keeps documents inside a desk drawer that opens through a pressure catch beneath the floor molding. Living servants are not supposed to know that. A dead carpenter notices immediately. By midnight, Corvin watches the meeting through a crack behind a decorative panel. Merrick stands in front of Varric's desk. His left arm is tied against his chest. His face looks gray. Varric looks considerably healthier. That probably feels unfair. St. Marshal Alira Dane stands beside the fireplace. Second name. She still wears white military robes. No armor tonight, no weapon visible. That means she expects Merrick to be less dangerous than the furniture. Merrick places the damaged brass plate from the pulse brazier onto the desk. A different plate, not the one Corvin removed. Apparently the expedition carried spare equipment. The suppression failed, Merrick says. Varric's face remains still. The reports say the brazier was destroyed. It worked before it was destroyed. Merrick hesitates. Bad decision, Varric notices. Before? The captain swallows, then tells the lie Corvin has been waiting for. We encountered residual undead. Nothing more. Alira finally turns from the fire. 36 men enter. 9 leave. And you call that residual? Merrick's jaw tightens. He should admit Corvin survived. He does not. Greed wins again, because admitting Corvin is alive means surrendering the 9th ossuary to the crown. And Merrick still believes the hidden control mechanism exists. He wants another chance to find it. Perfect. I can recover the command device, he says. Give me more men. Varric studies him. There. The trap sinks deeper. Not because Corvin manipulated Merrick's mind, not because the forged document is flawless, because Merrick wants it to be true. The most convincing bait is the one that promises someone exactly what they already desire. Varric picks up the brass plate. We already gave you men. The necromancer designed countermeasures before his death. Varric's eyes narrow. Merrick keeps going. There are automatic defenses, old contracts, maybe something tied to the ossuary itself. Alira looks unconvinced. Varric does not. He wants the 12,000 soldiers. More importantly, he wants proof Corvin built an illegal contingency. That proof would justify the execution forever. Politics and greed. A beautifully compatible pair. Varric opens a drawer. The dead hand inside the wall feels the mechanism move. He removes a sealed packet. Blue wax. Circle. 3 descending lines. Corvin watches. Not surprised. Only attentive. Varric does not open the packet. He places it beside Merrick. Then the next expedition will not use ordinary suppression. Alira looks at the seal. For the first time, something changes in her posture. Small. Almost nothing. But Corvin sees it. She knows that symbol, not vaguely. Personally. Merrick reaches toward the packet. Alira catches his wrist. Do not break that seal. Merrick freezes. Varric smiles faintly. You wanted stronger equipment, Captain. You will have it. From whom? Alira releases him. You do not need that answer. There it is. Another piece. Still not enough. Corvin does not rush. Unknown structures reveal themselves fastest when allowed to believe they remain hidden. Merrick takes the packet. He leaves with orders to return to the Ash March in 6 days. This time, 70 soldiers will accompany him. 12 radiant specialists, 3 siege wagons, and a sealed device provided through whatever sits behind the blue symbol. Corvin immediately updates the trap. The 9th ossuary was bait. Now it becomes a stage. But before that, he needs wider control. 112 undead are enough to watch a district, not enough to watch a kingdom. So our dead mage expands. Not through slaughter, through neglected places. Every city is full of the dead. Cemeteries are merely the organized portion. Foundation pits. Collapsed tunnels. Old plague houses. River mud. Battle monuments with bodies still underneath. Private family crypts. Unmarked prison graves. Corvin sends scouts along forgotten military routes leading out of the capital. He does not bind everything they find. Only useful remains. By the end of the 4th day, his network reaches 3 towns. By the 5th, 7. By the 6th, dead couriers operate along almost 80 miles of road. The connection never weakens. Corvin tests coordinated command across distance. 20 undead in the capital unlock storage rooms simultaneously. 9 more in Ashmarch villages enter abandoned watch posts. 3 dead miners beneath Greyhaven Ridge begin opening a sealed maintenance route toward the 9th ossuary. No delay, no mana drain, no fatigue. The scale is no longer theoretical. It is growing. Rusk grows with it. The executioner travels above ground for the first time, not openly. Corvin dresses him in a mortuary worker's coat and covers his throat with a high leather collar. His skin is pale enough to attract attention. Fortunately, half the capital looks pale during winter. Rusk accompanies two corpse porters through the old slaughter district. Their objective is simple: recover the weapon of a deceased dueling instructor buried beneath a demolished training hall. The weapon carries decades of combat residue, perfect for grave memory. Things go wrong halfway there. A group of street thieves surrounds the cart. 5 men, 1 crossbow. Cheap knives, very little planning. The leader grabs Rusk by the coat. Rusk does not look at Corvin. Corvin is not physically present. That is the point of the test. The executioner has standing instructions: avoid unnecessary killing, protect the mission, adapt independently. The thief demands money. Rusk stares at him. The man punches him. Bad choice. Rusk's head turns with the impact, then slowly returns. The thief becomes confused. Rusk still does nothing. Another man reaches into the cart. That crosses the mission threshold. Rusk moves. He catches the wrist, turns, dislocates the elbow. One clean motion. The second thief draws a knife. Rusk touches the blade. Death residue floods through grave memory. The knife has killed before. A dockside fighter's habits ride inside the steel. Rusk borrows the footwork, steps aside, hooks the attacker's knee, drops him. The crossbow fires. The bolt punches straight through Rusk's chest. He looks down at it, then back up. The crossbowman runs. Rusk does not chase. Mission first. He retrieves the cart, places the dislocated thief safely against a wall so passing traffic will not crush him, then continues toward the training hall with a bolt sticking through his torso. When Corvin receives the report through the corpse porters, he pauses. Rusk followed the command perfectly. But some choices were not commanded. Avoiding pursuit, moving the injured thief. Selecting non-lethal responses when killing would have been easier. Retained judgment is becoming personality. The executioner returns several hours later carrying a narrow black saber. He places it on the morgue table, then removes the crossbow bolt from his own chest and sets that beside it. Corvin examines the wound. Functional? Rusk rotates his shoulder, nods, then points at the saber. Corvin understands. Test it. Rusk touches the weapon. His entire stance changes. The effect is immediate. Feet lighter. Spine straight. Elbows relaxed. The dead dueling instructor trained for 43 years. That repetition lives inside the weapon like a groove worn into stone. Rusk draws the blade. One cut. The air whistles. A hanging strip of embalming cloth splits cleanly. Second cut. Faster. Third. The silver rings around his pupils flare. Then his arm spasms. The saber drops. Too much. Corvin catches it before it hits the floor. Rusk's hand remains locked in the final grip, but the overload passes faster than before. His capacity has improved. Corvin places the saber back into his hand. Rusk accepts it. No praise. None required. The executioner turns toward the door, then stops. He picks up the crooked sleeve he failed to repair days earlier, looks at it, then at the saber. He uses the blade to trim the cloth properly. Corvin watches him finish the coat. This time, the sleeve sits straight. Progress indeed. Meanwhile, Varric's 70-man expedition gathers supplies. Corvin knows every crate, every route, every officer assigned. He knows because 12 of the warehouse workers loading the wagons are dead. He even knows what Varric believes he is buying. The false command mechanism at the 9th ossuary has grown in his imagination. It is no longer merely a backup device. Varric now believes Corvin created a hidden crown override, a mechanism capable of transferring control of military undead to whoever possesses it. No such device exists, but Varric has already spent enough money to equip a small battalion recovering it. High Treasurer Bram quietly approves emergency funds. St. Marshal Alira contributes specialists. Captain Merrick stakes his reputation on the second expedition. 3 names on the ledger are now investing themselves in the same lie. Corvin could not have designed a cleaner convergence, yet one detail bothers the structure, not emotionally. Structurally, the sealed blue packet remains untouched. None of Corvin's spies can get close enough to inspect the contents. The object travels inside a lead-lined reliquary carried by Alira's specialists. No mana leaks from it, no death residue either. Whatever sits inside has been isolated from both detection systems. Corvin wants to know what it is before 70 soldiers bring it into an ossuary containing 12,000 corpses. That means a new route. A dead treasury archivist provides it. While tracing Bram Kest's financial approvals, the archivist uncovers an expenditure category Corvin has never seen. Not military, not cathedral, not royal household, continuity preservation. The category has existed for at least 91 years. No recipient names, no project descriptions, Only payments. Large ones, every few months, always routed through different ministries. Corvin compares the dates. Several align with major political events, wars, succession disputes, forbidden magic trials, the disappearance of 2 previous royal necromancers. Now his own execution. That is enough to earn a dedicated file. He sends an undead clerk into the deepest treasury archive. The clerk finds the cabinet before dawn. 3 locks. 1 mechanical. 1 blood-sealed. 1 keyed to a living official's pulse. Normally difficult. Corvin solves the first with a dead locksmith. The second with preserved blood taken from Bram's physician waste. The third is more annoying. Dead things do not have pulses, so Corvin creates one. A corpse hand wraps around a bladder filled with warm animal blood. Another undead presses the bladder in a measured rhythm. Artificial heartbeat. The lock accepts it. Ridiculous. Effective. The cabinet opens. Inside are almost no documents. Someone cleans this archive regularly, but they missed one thing: a broken ceramic token wedged behind the lowest drawer. The dead clerk retrieves it. Several hours later, the token rests on Corvin's operating table, blue glaze. One side carries the familiar circle with 3 descending lines. The reverse carries words, not a name. Not exactly, a designation. Third Custodian Funeral Index 17. Rusk stands beside the table. Corvin places the carved execution wood on the left, the blue wax seal in the center. The ceramic token on the right, same symbol, 3 different institutions. Cathedral, nobility, treasury. The pattern is finally large enough to stop looking accidental. Still, Corvin does not connect the final points, not yet. 1 object is evidence, 3 are a structure, but a structure without a purpose is only geometry. He needs the mechanism behind it. Fortunately, Lord Varric Sorn is about to carry that mechanism directly into the 9th ossuary. Corvin opens the obituary ledger. Varric remains first, Alira second, Bram third. The remaining 4 names wait below. 7 people believed they were burying one dangerous man. Instead, they have spent the last week building roads between themselves. Our undead necromancer closes the ledger, hands the ceramic token to Rusk, and orders every hidden route beneath the 9th ossuary opened before Varric's second expedition arrives. The sealed device Lord Varric Sorn brings into the 9th ossuary is not designed to suppress necromancers. It is designed to replace them. Corvin learns that 6 minutes after the second expedition enters the burial complex. 70 soldiers descend through the upper gate. 12 radiant specialists follow in pairs. 3 siege wagons remain outside beneath heavy guard. Captain Merrick Dahl walks near the front with one arm still strapped across his chest. St. Marshal Alira Dane comes personally this time. That matters. Varric does not. That matters even more. The man sends other people toward dangerous things whenever possible. Very noble of him. Corvin waits 3 levels below. Rusk stands beside him in the old command chamber, black saber at his hip and execution axe across his back. The silver rings in his eyes are brighter now, not stronger exactly, more stable. 24 military dead weight inside side corridors. Another 40 remain motionless in burial niches. Hundreds more are bound but inactive. The remaining thousands still sleep. Corvin has no intention of turning the 9th ossuary into a battlefield unless someone gives him a very convincing reason. Above them, the expedition spreads according to military procedure. Different formation this time. Alira has learned from Merrick's failure. Radiant specialists remain at the center. Soldiers carry paired mirrors to redirect purification light through corners. Corpse breakers test every chamber before the column advances. No one touches a body. No one opens an unmarked vault. Competent. Better. The dead mage approves in the same way a locksmith might approve of someone purchasing a better door. It will make the eventual entry more informative. Corvin observes through 8 hidden scouts. Alira stops beneath the western archive chamber. She notices immediately that several command rods are missing. Merrick notices her noticing. His heartbeat accelerates. Corvin feels it indirectly through the necrotic mark still buried in the captain's shoulder. Not the heartbeat itself. The rhythm pushes against the dead fragment. Fast, uneven. Fear does not require sophisticated necromancy when the host body advertises it physically. Alira turns. You said nothing was taken. Merrick keeps his face steady. Nothing relevant. Wrong answer. The Saint Marshal steps closer. One soldier nearby suddenly becomes extremely interested in a wall. Alira does not raise her voice. Relevant to whom? Merrick has survived war, political purges, and Corvin Vale rising from the dead. Apparently this conversation worries him more. He says nothing. Alira looks away. For now, we continue. For now. Corvin records the phrase, then the lead radiant specialist kneels beside the iron reliquary. The blue-sealed packet Corvin has been tracking for days comes out first. Alira breaks the wax herself. Inside is not a letter. It is a strip of pale human skin, preserved, inscribed. The circle with 3 descending lines covers one side. On the other side runs a sequence of tiny burial numerals. Rusk stiffens. Not because Corvin commands him. The executioner takes one involuntary step backward. His hand rises toward the leather collar covering his ruined throat. Corvin looks at him. Rusk stares at the skin. Silver floods his pupils. Grave memory activates without contact. That has never happened before. The executioner grips the stone wall. Fragments hit him, not thousands this time. 1. A man strapped to a cathedral table. Blue-glazed ceramic tokens. Hands wearing gray gloves. A blade removing skin from a corpse that is not quite cold. Then a voice. Index the useful pattern. Burn the personality. Rusk convulses. Corvin catches his shoulder. The memory jumps through their necromantic connection. For half a second, Corvin sees the same table. Different angle. Rows of bodies. Necromancers, battle mages. Executioners, healers, people preserved not for resurrection, but for extraction. Then the image ends. Rusk's knees nearly buckle. Corvin keeps him upright. The executioner looks toward him. Something has changed, not fear. Recognition. Rusk has seen that place before, probably while alive. Or while dying. Corvin does not question him. Not here. Not yet. Instead, he looks upward through the scout's eyes. Alira wraps the inscribed skin around a black metal spindle. The lead specialist inserts it into the center of the sealed device. The machine unfolds. 3 articulated arms extend from the reliquary. Each ends in a needle, no holy symbols. No solar salt, no purification script. Instead, the metal is engraved with funerary equations. Necromantic equations, old ones. Some older than anything Corvin learned at the Royal College. That is when the real problem becomes obvious. Someone did not merely study how to kill necromancers. Someone studied how necromancers work. The specialist turns a key. The machine activates. Corvin's control over 23 nearby corpses vanishes. Instantly, no resistance. No severing pain. The corpses simply stop belonging to him. Then they stand. Facing the machine. Corvin goes completely still. Now that is new. 1 military corpse walks toward Alira, then another, then 7. The device is not suppressing authority. It is overriding priority. A new hierarchy is being inserted above the necromancer. Corvin attempts to reclaim 1 soldier. Nothing. He tries a second. Blocked. Not by mana, by rule. The device is speaking directly to the dead through the same underlying structure his posthumous condition uses. That should not be possible, unless someone discovered that structure first. The obituary ledger opens on its own. No name appears. Instead, the funeral equations around the page rearrange. Authority conflict detected. External death command architecture recognized. Classification incomplete. Corvin closes it manually. Enough. The machine is already turning the 9th ossuary against him. 23 corpses march toward the upper chamber. Alira watches without surprise. Merrick looks considerably less composed. You can command them? The Saint Marshal answers without looking at him. Not me. Merrick looks at the device. Then who? Alira finally turns. The office that kept your kingdom alive before your grandfather had a surname. There it is. Not enough, but closer. Corvin pulls back every bound corpse outside the machine's range. The stolen 23 remain gone. He tests the boundary, approximately 200 feet. Beyond that distance, his authority returns immediately. Range-limited override. Good. Nothing is infinite except poor decisions made by confident aristocrats. Alira orders the expedition deeper. The machine rolls with them. Every bound corpse entering its radius switches sides. Corvin does not fight the process. He watches, measures, counts. The override takes less than 1 second. Command transfer remains stable while inside range. The corpse returns to Corvin the moment it leaves. No permanent corruption, no identity change. Pure jurisdiction. Someone built a second throne inside death itself and attached wheels to it. Honestly, that is almost rude. Corvin retreats 1 chamber at a time, not from fear. To preserve information, he sends a single corpse into the radius carrying a dead rat inside its ribcage. The soldier switches allegiance. The rat does not. Different targeting threshold. He sends another carrying a severed human hand. Both switch, so the machine recognizes human necromantic bindings individually. He sends Rusk nowhere near it. Not yet. A retained ego may react differently. That experiment can wait until failure stops, meaning permanent loss. The expedition reaches the false control chamber Corvin prepared days earlier. Merrick almost smiles. Greed remains impressively resilient. There, he points toward the stone doors. The forged military symbol sits above them. Alira studies the chamber. Then the blue-marked device. Then Merrick. She already knows the chamber is false. Corvin sees it immediately. Her expression does not change. She lets Merrick believe otherwise. Interesting. The captain rushes toward the door. His men force it open. Inside sits a deliberately theatrical arrangement of old command rods, rusted mechanisms, burial ledgers, and one central pedestal. The fake crown override, a piece of engineering Corvin assembled from actual military hardware and absolutely no functional magic. Merrick stares at it like a starving man looking at a banquet. Alira looks bored. Then she says something that shifts the entire board. "Take the captain." Merrick turns. "What?" 2 radiant specialists seize his arms. He fights. Badly. His injured shoulder tears open. The necrotic mark inside him shifts. Corvin feels every movement. St. Marshal, you were never sent here to recover Vale's mechanism. Merrick freezes. Alira walks past him toward the false pedestal. "You were sent because someone needed to see whether he had discovered ours." Silence. Even Corvin pauses. There it is, not merely a weapon. A test. His execution. The forged trail. The expedition. Perhaps all of it has been measured against something older. Merrick shakes his head. "I don't understand." Alira looks at him. "No, that is why you were useful." She removes a narrow blue token from inside her sleeve. Ceramic. Same glaze as the fragment recovered from Bram Kest's treasury archive. This one is intact. The symbol appears on the front. The back carries text. Second Custodian Funeral Index 9. Corvin sees it clearly through the scout in the ceiling. Second Custodian. The treasury fragment belonged to Third Custodian. At least 3, possibly more. Alira inserts the token into the device. A hidden compartment opens. Inside are thin black plates. Each plate carries names. Corvin cannot read all of them from this angle. He moves the scout closer. One name becomes clear. Malin Roar, Royal Necromancer. Executed 47 years ago. Another. Vasa Tren, Grave Engineer. Disappeared during the Eastern Succession. Another. Orden Pell. Battle Healer. Officially died of fever. More plates. More specialists. Not criminals. Assets. People with rare techniques. Corvin understands before Alira explains anything. Fortunately, she explains enough for Merrick to confirm it. The Continuity Directorate does not preserve people, she says. It preserves functions. There. A name. The Continuity Directorate. Not a cult. Not an ancient order hiding beneath vague robes. A state mechanism. Older than the current dynasty. Embedded across treasury, cathedral, military procurement, noble administration, and probably several institutions Corvin has not touched yet. Its purpose sits directly in front of him. Useful abilities survive. Owners do not. Merrick stares at the black plates. You kill them? Alira's expression remains flat. When necessary. And then? Their patterns are indexed. Merrick looks toward the machine. His face drains. Corvin does not need the answer spoken aloud. The preserved skin, the extracted physical memory, the override equations, Rusk's involuntary reaction. The Directorate does not simply study corpses. It harvests useful death patterns from exceptional people and builds tools from them. That means the machine overriding Corvin's undead may contain fragments taken from previous necromancers. Not metaphorically, mechanically. The dead authority of people who came before him has been processed into a reusable state technology. Now, the carved symbol beneath his execution platform makes sense. The cathedral chamber was never merely an execution room. It was a collection point. Corvin's mana core was punctured before death. His contracts were deliberately severed. His body was supposed to be preserved long enough for the Directorate to examine whatever remained. Except Varric ordered burning too quickly. Or thought he did. Something changed. Someone wanted Corvin dead. Someone else may have wanted what came afterward. The reveal does not produce anger. There is still no anger to produce. It creates a revised model. His revenge list contains 7 visible participants, but those 7 may not represent the same layer of responsibility. Varric fabricates charges. Alira executes Directorate procedure. Bram moves the money. Others forge, torture, witness, authorize. And above or behind them sits a structure designed to consume exceptional dead people and convert them into permanent institutional property. That changes the scale. Corvin no longer needs to know merely who killed him. He needs to know whether his death was intended as an execution, an acquisition, or both. The target expands. The order does not change. Varric remains first, one problem at a time. Then Merrick makes himself relevant again. He lunges toward the blue device, not to destroy it, to steal one of the black plates. Of course. Even facing an organization that apparently industrializes murdered specialists, the man remains committed to monetizing the situation. Almost admirable. A radiant specialist strikes him down. Merrick collapses beside the machine. Blood splashes across the lower casing. The necrotic mark inside his shoulder touches the metal. And suddenly Corvin feels the device directly, not through vision, through dead contact. Hundreds of indexed patterns, compressed, layered, stripped of personality, a necromancer's command reflex, a corpse engineer's preservation instinct, an executioner's restraint mechanics, a healer's tissue mapping, fragments stacked into one artificial funerary architecture. Corvin nearly loses the connection, not from overload, from scale. Then, beneath all of it, he finds an empty channel, a space deliberately designed to accept another pattern, a new index. His. The machine was prepared for Corvin Vale. That confirms it. He was not simply supposed to die, he was supposed to become component material. Corvin withdraws from the contact. Immediately, calmly, the entire plan recalibrates a second time. Escape the Directorate's detection. Preserve the machine. Identify the custodians. Determine why Varric was allowed to execute an asset before collection. And above all, never let them learn what death actually did to him. Because if the Continuity Directorate discovers an undead necromancer with no mana requirement and unlimited command range, they will not merely try to kill him again. They will try to reproduce him. Corvin looks at Rusk. The executioner is staring upward. His hand rests against his own throat. Then he pulls the leather collar down. For the first time, Corvin sees a mark beneath the execution wound. Tiny, blue, almost faded. A circle, 3 descending lines. Rusk touches it, then points toward the ceiling, toward Alira, toward the machine. His expression is no longer confused. He remembers enough. Not everything, just one fragment. He was processed by them. Perhaps not fully. Perhaps his death came before extraction finished. That may explain why his retained ego survived. Corvin steps closer. Rusk reaches into his coat and removes the black saber. Then he places the weapon on the table between them. His hand stays on the hilt. Grave memory activates. Not uncontrolled this time. Deliberate. The silver rings widen. A pattern travels through the blade. Then through Rusk. Then, because his hand remains inside Corvin's necromantic field, a thin fragment reaches Corvin too. A room. Blue tiles. Gray gloves. A rack containing narrow metal needles. One technician says a phrase, "Third pass convergence failed. Ego contamination remains." Another answers. Then separate the memory channels before indexing. The image ends. Rusk releases the sword. Corvin looks at him. Now they have more than an enemy. They have a flaw. The Directorate removes personality because personality contaminates stored function. Rusk survived because that separation failed. Corvin's own condition preserves memory and judgment without emotion. 2 different failures, possibly the same underlying weakness. He turns toward the military command table, then places 3 objects on it. The cathedral chain, the carved execution wood, the blue ceramic token. Beside them, he adds a 4th. A thin strip of black metal taken from the broken pulse brazier. The idea is crude, dangerous, not ready. But the principle is now visible. If the Directorate can stack stolen death patterns into one artificial command architecture, Corvin may be able to do the reverse. Not store memories, synchronize them. One controlled channel. Multiple dead functions, temporarily aligned without erasing identity. Rusk's grave memory could become the bridge. Corvin's grave echo could become the control layer. The technique does not exist yet. For now, it is only 4 objects on a table and a theory, exactly where dangerous things should begin. Above them, Alira orders the false crown override dismantled. She takes Merrick prisoner. Then she gives the continuity device a new instruction. Search for residual sovereign authority. The machine unfolds all 3 needle arms. Its range expands, farther than before. Corvin immediately withdraws every active corpse in the lower ossuary. Rusk steps back. The silver in his eyes flickers. The Directorate machine pulses once, then stops. One of its black plates cracks. Alira turns sharply. The specialist checks the mechanism. What happened? He stares at the reading. Conflicting index. Whose? The man hesitates, then looks toward the darkness below. Unknown. Corvin sees Alira's face change. Very slightly. For the first time since his execution, Saint Marshal Alira Dane looks genuinely uncertain. Good. Not terrified. Not desperate. Uncertain is enough. She orders an immediate withdrawal. No deeper search. No attempt to recover the 12,000 dead. The expedition turns around. The machine leaves with them. Merrick leaves in chains. Corvin lets all of them go. Rusk looks toward him. No question this time. He understands. A trap that catches only one layer is a small trap. Now they know another layer exists. The Continuity Directorate believes something inside the 9th ossuary interfered with their machine. They do not know Corvin is standing 2 chambers away. They do not know Rusk retained personality. They do not know the dead necromancer has already touched their indexing architecture through Merrick's wound. And they definitely do not know he has started designing a method to make their greatest advantage work in reverse. Corvin waits until the expedition is 10 miles south. Then he walks into the false control chamber. The 23 corpses stolen earlier immediately return to him. One by one, they turn away from the departing directorate machine. Authority restored. He raises his hand. Every dead soldier in the chamber lowers theirs. The obituary ledger opens. 7 names remain on the first page, but a second page has appeared behind them. Blank, except for one heading. Continuity Directorate. No individuals. No accusations. Not yet. Corvin closes the book. Then he removes Lord Varric Sorn's forged authorization from the false pedestal and burns it. The first version of the plan is finished. Varric is no longer baiting himself toward a non-existent weapon. He is now connected to an institution powerful enough to turn dead necromancers into machinery. That means killing him immediately would destroy information. Unfortunately for Varric, Corvin has eternity. Fortunately for Corvin, Varric only has whatever time remains before the Directorate decides he has become inconvenient. The undead necromancer returns to the command chamber, places the black metal strip against Rusk's saber, and begins building the first prototype of a technique the Continuity Directorate was never supposed to face. Lord Varric Sorn spends the next 4 days preparing to survive an enemy he still believes is dead. That tells Corvin more than any confession could. Varric triples the guards around Sorn Manor. He moves his family records into a fortified archive. He stops using ordinary messengers. He even has the wine cellar beneath his estate exorcised because one terrified servant claims to hear scratching inside the walls. The scratching is real. It is also just a dead rat Corvin left there on purpose. Sometimes intelligence work benefits from allowing paranoia to decorate the rest. Corvin watches all of it from beneath the capital. His network now stretches far beyond the old morgue. 286 bound dead operate across roads, crypts, sewers, abandoned barracks, noble estates, and government foundations. Still not an army, still infrastructure, but the shape is changing. The dead are no longer merely collecting information, they are beginning to move resources. A forgotten military workshop beneath the western wall receives rusted armor by night. An abandoned embalming house starts processing preserved tendon, bone plates, and corpse thread. 3 collapsed courier tunnels reopen. The old morgue becomes too small, so Corvin expands downward into plague chambers, the city sealed generations ago. Nobody living notices. The people who built those rooms stopped filing complaints a very long time ago. At the center of the largest chamber sits the first prototype. Rusk calls it nothing. Corvin calls it the convergence frame. 4 death-saturated objects are mounted around a black iron ring, the cathedral chain, the broken directorate plate, the blue ceramic custodian token, Rusk's black saber. In the center stands a dead soldier from the 9th Regiment. Not raised. Not yet. Corvin places one hand against the corpse's chest. Rusk stands opposite him. The executioner grips the saber. Again, Rusk nods. Grave memory activates. The saber releases the dueling instructor's physical pattern, footwork, balance, reaction rhythm. Normally, Rusk absorbs it into himself. This time, Corvin intercepts the pattern. Grave Echo takes the outer structure. Then he redirects it through the iron ring and into the dead soldier. For 3 seconds, nothing happens. Then the corpse moves. Not with a soldier's habitual stance. With the duelist's. One foot slides back. Shoulders loosen. The dead man's hand reaches automatically for a sword that is not there. Success. Very small success. Then the entire pattern tears apart. The corpse's left arm twists backward. The jaw cracks. The iron ring splits along one edge. Rusk releases the saber. Corvin stops the transfer. The soldier collapses. No explosion. No mysterious power surge, just mechanical failure. Better. Failures that leave evidence are easier to fix. Corvin examines the shoulder joint. Pattern conflict. Rusk taps his own chest. Then the corpse. Difference in body? Corvin nods. The dueling instructor trained with a narrow frame and unusually long reach. This soldier's skeleton is heavier. The borrowed pattern attempted movements the body could not reproduce. The Directorate solved this problem by removing identity and compressing function into abstract components. Corvin does not want abstraction. Abstraction destroys exactly what makes Rusk useful. Judgment, adaptation, personality, so the method has to remain selective. No full memory transfer, no forced overwrite, only individual movement sequences matched to compatible anatomy. Much slower, much more precise. Rusk picks up the cracked iron ring, then points toward himself. Corvin looks at him. Rusk taps the ring. Then his sternum. Use him as the bridge. Again. Riskier, also logical. Rusk already survives pattern transfer without losing ego. Corvin takes the ring. One motion. Rusk nods. They choose something simple. A single dueling parry. Rusk activates grave memory. Corvin captures only the elbow rotation and wrist angle. Nothing else. The pattern passes through the convergence frame, into Rusk, then out through Corvin's authority, into the dead soldier. The corpse raises its arm, turns the wrist. Stops. Perfect. No distortion, no breakage. One motion. One compatible frame. Corvin repeats the process, then another. After 6 successful transfers, the corpse can perform a short defensive sequence that belonged to someone else in life. Not intelligently, not yet, but accurately. The technique is beginning to exist. Rusk lowers the saber. The silver rings in his eyes flare brighter than before. Too bright, his hand shakes. Corvin notices immediately. The executioner presses 2 fingers against his temple. A new message forms quietly inside. Corvin's awareness subordinate convergence threshold exceeded. Secondary structure attempting formation. Rusk looks at him, then at his own hand. Black lines spread from the wrist beneath dead skin. Not decay, not damage. Thin geometric channels. Like funerary script growing beneath the flesh. Corvin catches his arm. The lines stop at the elbow. The system readout changes. Evolution state incomplete. Trigger requirements unresolved. There it is. Not evolution. Preparation. A new structure is forming inside Rusk because repeated grave memory transfers are forcing his body to develop dedicated channels for death pattern storage. Corvin releases him. Do not push it further. Rusk frowns. A very human reaction from a dead man with half a throat. Corvin looks at the black lines. They stabilize first. Rusk studies the arm, then nods. No argument. At least not one requiring a functioning voice. The prototype is set aside. They will return to it. They need to, because the Continuity Directorate has started moving too. Corvin learns that through High Treasurer Bram Kest. Third name. Bram has been difficult to watch. The treasurer sleeps in a residence built directly above a consecrated vault. His servants are rotated weekly. His documents are burned after review. He never touches directorate messages with bare skin. Reasonable habits. Corvin bypasses all of them with a dead accountant hidden beneath the treasury floor. The accountant cannot read sealed documents through stone, but he can count footsteps, packages. Wait, frequency. For 3 nights, directorate couriers visit Bram after midnight. On the 4th, no courier arrives. Instead, Bram leaves. That is unusual enough to matter. Corvin follows through 6 undead positioned along the route. The treasurer travels without official markings. 4 guards. 1 black carriage. He enters St. Ordan's Cathedral through a side gate. Same place where Corvin was executed. Same place where Rusk died. The building has been partially closed since the accident beneath the execution chamber. Officially, repairs are underway. Unofficially, directorate specialists have taken control of the lower levels. Corvin cannot send ordinary undead inside. The new wards identify bound corpses immediately, so he uses something living. Or almost living, Captain Merrick. The man is still a prisoner. The necrotic mark inside his shoulder remains intact. Elira keeps him beneath the cathedral in a sealed holding cell. She has not executed him. That means he still has value. Corvin extends minimal awareness through the dead tissue. Pressure, temperature, movement. Then Merrick is dragged from his cell. The mark travels with him. Good. He passes 1 ward, then another. The dead fragment remains dormant. Nobody detects it. Merrick enters a chamber. Corvin receives vibrations through bone and scar tissue. Multiple footsteps. At least 7 people. A table. Metal placed upon stone. Then a voice. Bram Kest. We cannot keep compensating for Sorn's mistakes. Another voice. Elira. We are past compensation. A third person speaks. Older. Male. Unknown. The corpse was not recovered. Corvin becomes completely still beneath the morgue. Rusk notices. The executioner turns. Corvin raises 1 hand. Quiet. Through Merrick's body, the meeting continues. Bram says, "The cathedral report confirmed incineration." The unknown man answers, "The cathedral report confirmed remains." Elira says nothing. That distinction matters. Someone in the directorate doubts Corvin's death. Not knows. Doubts. The unknown speaker continues. The 9th ossuary responded to sovereign interference. An inactive necromantic structure does not resist indexing. Bram sounds irritated. Then Vale left a mechanism behind. No, a pause. The interference adapted. That earns silence. Corvin understands why. Machines do not usually adapt after their owner dies. Unless the owner is still participating. Elira finally speaks. You believe he survived. I believe we have insufficient evidence that he failed to. There, the directorate is now looking for him. The pressure rises immediately. The unknown man gives new orders. Every royal morgue is to be audited. Every battlefield grave connected to Corvin is to be checked. Every mortuary clerk who worked beneath him is to be detained. All illegal corpse movement within the capital becomes a priority threat, not because the kingdom fears undead attacks. Because the Directorate suspects one specific dead man may still be active, Corvin recalculates. The old morgue is no longer safe long-term. The underground routes are no longer merely convenient. They are now survival architecture. Bram asks the obvious question. And Sorn? The unknown man answers without hesitation. Let him continue. Corvin focuses. Elira sounds colder. He is destabilizing the situation. Exactly, there it is. Varric is not protected. He is being used. The Directorate wants him visible, active, afraid, provocative, a noisy aristocrat drawing out whatever remains of Corvin Vale. Varric believes he is protecting himself from a dead necromancer. In reality, he is bait. Corvin almost appreciates the symmetry. Almost, Bram asks. And if Vale comes for him? The old man answers. Then we finally observe the post-mortem state directly. Merrick's shoulder shifts. The prisoner must be trembling. Corvin is not. The new model settles into place. The Directorate suspects survival. It lacks proof. It wants Varric attacked. Therefore, Corvin cannot simply strike Varric now. Not publicly. Not in any way that reveals his true condition. The revenge remains. The method changes again. One name at a time still works. The first name simply needs to destroy himself where the Directorate cannot measure the process. The meeting ends with one final order. Activate Funeral Index 9. Elira responds immediately. That index was sealed. Not anymore. Merrick is dragged away before Corvin learns what Funeral Index 9 actually is. Annoying. Useful. Danger usually becomes clearer after it starts moving. The answer arrives the next morning. Across the capital, cemetery bells begin ringing without funerals. Not church bells, burial bells. Small iron bells mounted beside old graveyards. Corvin senses the effect before living citizens understand anything is wrong. Bound corpses hesitate, only for a fraction of a second. Then several lose commands. Not permanently, but enough. A dead courier stops in the middle of a drainage shaft. A spy beneath Sorn Manor drops a document. 3 workers inside the Western workshop turn toward the nearest cemetery at exactly the same time. Corvin severs their active tasks. All 3 become still. The bells ring again. This time, black script forms inside his awareness. External index broadcast detected. Priority seeking signal. Source distributed. Funeral Index 9. Not a machine, a network. The Directorate has installed command beacons inside old cemeteries, probably decades ago, perhaps longer. Dormant until now. Each broadcast attempts to identify necromantic authority in the surrounding district, not seize control. Locate it. Smart. Much more dangerous. Every active corpse becomes a potential signal reflection. Corvin immediately shuts down more than half his network. 286 active dead drop to 117. Couriers stop. Spies freeze inside walls. Workshops go silent. Information flow collapses. The Directorate has forced him to choose between scale and invisibility. Good move. Corvin changes the board. He stops using continuous control. Instead, he creates delayed commands. A dead courier receives an instruction while inside a shielded chamber. Walk north at sunset. Enter Tunnel 3. Collect packet. Return before dawn. Then Corvin releases active authority completely. The corpse does not move. Not yet. At sunset, it stands on its own. The burial bells ring. No response. No active link exists to detect. The courier follows the stored instruction from preserved dead structure. Returns. Only then does Corvin reconnect. Effective. Limited. A delayed command cannot adapt. If the tunnel collapses, the corpse will keep walking into stone. Still, the solution restores part of the network without advertising his presence. Corvin expands the method. Simple tasks become preloaded. Complicated tasks remain actively controlled. The Directorate decreases his efficiency. It does not remove it. Rusk watches the process, then points at himself. Corvin understands. Test whether Funeral Index 9 affects him. No. Rusk folds his arms. The black channels beneath his skin reach slightly farther up the forearm now. He wants data. Corvin studies him. Retained ego means he may resist the beacon, or the beacon may detect him more clearly than ordinary undead. Both possibilities matter. Rusk keeps staring. Stubborn. Again. Corvin allows one test. They move into a burial district just before the next broadcast. Rusk wears the mortuary coat. High collar. Black saber. No visible wounds. Corvin remains several streets away inside a sealed crypt. Connection minimal. The bell rings. Every ordinary bound corpse in the district twitches. Rusk stops walking. The silver rings in his eyes widen. Then he turns, not toward the cemetery, toward something beneath it. His hand grips the saber. The black channels under his skin spread to the shoulder. Corvin feels a violent surge through their bond. Not control, recognition. Rusk is seeing death patterns inside the beacon. Grave memory is reading the broadcast itself. Impossible before, not anymore. Images hit him, index plates, execution records, stored reflexes, thousands of compressed fragments flowing through the cemetery bell system. Rusk nearly falls. Corvin cuts the connection. Too late. The black channels ignite across the executioner's chest. He drops one hand to the street. A new system message appears. Subordinate evolution pathway confirmed. Grave memory advancing toward archive vessel. Preparation requirement. Controlled convergence with indexed death patterns. Corvin does not miss the wording. Archive vessel. Rusk is developing the exact property the Directorate tried to manufacture artificially. A body capable of containing multiple death patterns without erasing the ego underneath. That makes him dangerous. It also makes him a target if anyone understands what he is becoming. Corvin pulls him into an alley. Rusk steadies himself. Then something changes in his eyes. Multiple movement patterns flicker across his body at once. A swordsman's stance. An executioner's shoulder alignment. A prisoner's lock-breaking wrist motion. A mortuary worker's precise fingers. Too many. For 1 second, Rusk is not moving like one dead man. He is moving like a library. Then he forces himself still. Good. Control remains. Barely. Corvin places one hand on his chest. Not again until the frame is ready. Rusk nods. This time without resistance. He understands the risk now. Across the city, Funeral Index 9 continues ringing. Varric responds badly. His paranoia becomes policy. Sorn guards begin searching cemetery districts. Servants are questioned. Morticians are arrested. 2 undertakers disappear. 3 lower nobles connected to Corvin during the war are summoned for interrogation. Varric believes he is closing a net around a dead enemy. The Directorate allows him to do it. Worse, it feeds him names. Corvin sees the pattern through Bram's payment records. People Varric arrests are not random. Several once worked on corpse logistics. One handled preserved remains. Another maintained battlefield identity ledgers. The Directorate is using Varric's fear to clean up old loose ends. That cannot continue. Not because Corvin suddenly discovers compassion. He has none to discover. Because disappearing witnesses reduces information. And because one of the arrested mortuary clerks is holding something important. Old Mara Ven, 73 years old. Former burial registrar. She processed corpses during Corvin's first military appointment. She also cataloged the body of Malin Roar, the royal necromancer executed 47 years ago. One of the names from the Directorate plates. Varric's men take her at noon. Corvin learns through a delayed undead watcher. By evening, she is inside Sorn Manor. The Directorate expects this. Corvin knows because Elira sends no objection. That settles the next move. Varric needs to feel safe enough to act. Then lose that safety in a way the Directorate cannot attribute to necromantic power. No undead assault. No impossible resurrection. No public corpse army. Something simpler. Human corruption. Varric already has plenty available. Corvin spends the night arranging pieces. Forged accounting records enter one merchant office. A genuine payment ledger leaves another. A dead clerk plants copies of Bram Kest's emergency expenditures inside a tax investigator's archive. A living smuggler receives anonymous information about Sorn military purchases. Captain Merrick's surviving soldiers receive proof that Varric withheld compensation for the 9th ossuary disaster. Nothing magical, nothing supernatural, only documents, greed, fear, betrayal, all materials the living manufacture perfectly well on their own. By dawn, the first rumor spreads. Lord Varric Sorn has been diverting military funds. By noon, a second appears. He has been privately purchasing restricted corpse control equipment. By evening, one surviving soldier claims Varric knowingly sent men into the 9th ossuary without proper warning. The man is not lying. That helps. Varric begins losing control of his own story, exactly when Corvin wants him to. At midnight, a dead courier returns to the morgue carrying one final piece, a letter stolen from Sorn Manor, written by Varric himself. Addressed to Bram Kest. The message contains only 3 lines. The first requests emergency legal authority. The second requests permission to execute Mara Ven before formal questioning. The third matters most. If the old registrar truly saw Roar's intake record, she may know why Vale was selected. Selected. Not accused, not condemned. Selected. Corvin reads the word twice, then folds the letter. Mara Ven knows something. Varric knows she knows it. The Directorate wants her gone. The pressure is no longer approaching. It is here. Corvin opens the obituary ledger. Lord Varric Sorn remains first. His entry now carries a new notation. Immediate action threshold reached. Rusk stands beside the convergence frame. The black channels beneath his skin pulse once, then stop. The executioner lifts his newly repaired coat, fastens the black saber at his hip, and picks up the axe that once killed Corvin. No command is needed. He already understands where this is going. Above them, Funeral Index 9 rings again across the capital. Sorn Manor begins preparing Maraven's midnight execution. And beneath the city, Corvin places Varric's own signed order beside the first forged document from the 9th ossuary. The trap has finished collecting weight. Now all that remains is letting gravity do the rest. Lord Varric Sorn loses his fortune before he loses a single guard. That is how Corvin knows the trap is finally ready. At 9 in the morning, the Royal Treasury freezes 3 Sorn commercial accounts. At 10, the War Ministry suspends 2 military supply contracts. At 11, a tax magistrate receives copies of procurement records proving that Varric purchased restricted anti-necromancy equipment using emergency defense funds. By noon, merchants stop extending him credit, and none of it looks like necromancy. That is the important part. See, the forged authorization Corvin planted beneath the capital was never meant to fool Varric forever. It only needed to make him move. Varric moved troops. He spent money. He contacted Bram Kest. He requested directorate equipment. He sent Captain Merrick Dahl into the 9th ossuary twice. Then, terrified that Corvin might still have hidden assets, he began arresting mortuary workers and confiscating corpse-related property. Every response created paperwork. Every payment created witnesses. Every secret shipment passed through someone else's hands. Corvin did not build a trap around one fake document. He built it around Varric's certainty that he deserved whatever power the document promised. Now that certainty has matured into evidence, our dead mage stands in the abandoned morgue while living officials tear apart Sorn holdings above him. No spell, no corpse army. Just consequences assembled with administrative precision. Rusk watches through a narrow ventilation slit opening toward the street. Government carriages keep passing. The executioner's silver-ringed eyes follow each one. Corvin places 3 documents on the operating table. The forged 9th ossuary authorization. Varric's genuine request to kill Maraven. A directorate payment voucher routed through Bram Kest. 1 lie. 2 truths. Together, they tell a story dangerous enough to force every participant to protect themselves. That is the real ignition point. Corvin sends copies in 3 directions. 1 to the War Ministry. 1 to the Royal Legal Office. 1 to a newspaper printer whose dead father still occupies a sealed crypt beneath his workshop. The printer receives no threat, only documents. Humans become surprisingly energetic when scandal arrives with supporting paperwork. By early afternoon, Varric understands what is happening. Not all of it. Enough. A bound corpse hidden inside Sorn Manor hears the first crash. Glass breaks. A servant screams. Then Varric's voice tears through the private study. Who had access to the procurement ledgers? Nobody answers. He slams another object. Who? His guards stare at one another. 3 of them already know the answer is too many people. That is exactly why the trap works. Varric built every layer of his conspiracy through subordinates. He used clerks to fabricate correspondence, treasury intermediaries to hide payments, military officers to move equipment, cathedral officials to authorize Corvin's execution. Now he cannot identify the leak because his own crimes required a network. Our undead necromancer created one false road. Varric paved every branch himself. Then the second blow lands. Captain Merrick Dahl disappears from Directorate custody, not because Corvin rescues him, because the Directorate moves him. That distinction matters. One delayed undead watcher stationed near St. Orden's Cathedral sees a covered prison wagon leave through the rear gate. Merrick is inside, destination unknown. Corvin does not follow immediately. Instead, he watches Alira. The St. Marshal exits the cathedral 15 minutes later. Different route. 6 radiant guards, no Directorate machine. That means Merrick is no longer ordinary evidence. He is being removed, possibly indexed, possibly executed. Either way, the Directorate is cleaning up. Varric is next. Corvin expected that. He simply expected another few days. Timeline compressed. Plan adjusts. Again, Maraven's midnight execution cannot wait. Neither can Varric's collapse. Corvin turns toward Rusk. Tonight, Rusk reaches for the black saber. The geometric channels beneath his dead skin pulse from wrist to shoulder. The convergence frame has stabilized enough for limited field use. Limited is carrying heroic weight in that sentence. The technique can now hold 3 movement patterns at once inside Rusk without immediate collapse. 1 from the dueling instructor. 1 from a prison restraint specialist whose chain survived 90 executions. One from a battlefield shield captain recovered beneath the western wall. 3 patterns, 3 incompatible lives. One retained ego choosing when to use each. Not evolution, not yet. But close. Corvin takes the cathedral chain from the frame. Rusk looks at it. Then at him. No cemetery broadcasts. The executioner nods. Funeral Index 9 remains active across the capital. Every burial bell continues searching for signs of sovereign necromantic control. So Corvin cannot simply march undead soldiers into Sorn Manor. That would hand the Directorate exactly what it wants. Instead, he does something much more dangerous. He walks there himself. No active undead army. No remote commands. Just Corvin, Rusk, and 6 corpses carrying delayed instructions. The first corpse is a dead locksmith. The second is a former chimney worker. The third and fourth were Sorn servants in life. The last 2 are military sappers. Each receives one preloaded task in the shielded morgue. No adaptive connection, no detectable broadcast. Once released, they move according to dead memory and stored command alone. Crude, perfect for tonight. At dusk, Sorn Manor closes every gate. Varric doubles the guard. Mara Ven is moved from a basement holding room into the private chapel because Varric believes consecrated stone will interfere with necromancers. Normally, that would be reasonable. Corvin no longer operates normally. The dead chimney worker enters first through a roof flue. No bells react. No necromantic pulse appears. It crawls through soot, drops into an unused service chamber, and unlocks one window. The locksmith enters next, then the former servants. They already know the estate. Retained physical memory guides them through corridors they walked thousands of times while alive. One opens a pantry passage. Another disables a mechanical alarm. The sappers reach the eastern wall foundation and begin cutting through support wedges installed during an old renovation. Nobody notices. Corvin and Rusk enter through the servants' gate wearing mortuary coats. One living guard recognizes Rusk. Not as the executioner, as something wrong. The guard reaches for his sword. Rusk touches the man's wrist, does not kill him. He rotates once. The prison restraint pattern activates through grave memory. Arm pinned, elbow locked, balance broken. The guard hits the wall before he understands the movement. Rusk catches the body before it makes noise. Then he lowers the unconscious man to the floor. Control, better than before. Corvin continues walking. First stage, receive the obstacle. Sorn Manor is prepared for a necromantic assault. Radiant lamps line the main hall. Sunbrass charms hang above doors. 3 portable cemetery bells sit inside the central courtyard, all connected to Funeral Index 9. Varric has even hired 2 Directorate-adjacent technicians to monitor abnormal corpse activity. Good. The defenses are strong. Against the wrong version of Corvin Vale. The moment he enters the outer hall, a guard captain sees his face. Everything stops. The man's pupils widen. His sword comes halfway out. Vale. Corvin keeps walking. The captain looks at his throat, at the execution scar, then at the pale hands. No. A reasonable response. Still useless. The guard shouts. Radiant lamps flare. Soldiers flood the hall. The first purification blast catches Corvin across the chest. His coat burns open. Skin chars. No mana disruption follows. The second blast takes part of his jaw. He continues forward. Now panic spreads. Living men can rationalize rumors. They struggle much more when the executed man physically enters the room. One soldier drives a spear through Corvin's side. Another hacks into his shoulder. A radiant lamp detonates at arm's length. His left eye blackens. 3 ribs crack. His body takes damage. Plenty. None of it creates exhaustion. No shock. No bleeding pressure. No mana depletion. Second stage. Read the structure. The guards depend on the courtyard bells for detection. Radiant lamps require hand-cranked charge cells. The technicians stand behind the second defensive line. Every soldier rotates around those 2 assets. More importantly, most of the weapons here belong to Sorn veterans. Death-saturated weapons. Exactly what Corvin needs. A guard swings a saber at his neck. Corvin catches the flat of the blade. Grave Echo opens. 1 death, then another, then 6. This weapon has passed through several owners. Corvin does not take one movement pattern. He takes fragments from all of them. A cavalry draw cut, a bodyguard's inside parry, a duelist's shoulder slip, a street fighter's reverse grip. Too much for the old version of Grave Echo. Not anymore. He does not hold the memories separately. He synchronizes only what overlaps. Balance. Angle. Timing. The first crude principles of the convergence frame applied directly through his own corpse. For 3 heartbeats that he no longer possesses, Corvin Vale moves with the accumulated physical residue of everyone this weapon helped kill. Third stage. Ignition. He slips past the spear line, redirects one blade, turns another, breaks the crank handle on the first radiant lamp. A guard swings from behind. Corvin pivots without looking. The dead movement pattern already knows that attack. His elbow catches the man's chest. Bone cracks. Another soldier lunges. Corvin takes the spear through his abdomen deliberately, traps the shaft inside his own corpse, then uses it as leverage to pull the attacker off balance. Ridiculous. Effective. The second lamp fires. Rusk intercepts it. Golden light tears across the executioner's shoulder. Dead flesh burns away. The black channels beneath his skin become visible. 3 pattern structures ignite at once. Duelist. Restraint specialist. Shield captain. Rusk steps into the blast instead of away from it. He catches a guard's shield. Grave memory reads the dead residue in the leather straps. Another combat pattern joins him temporarily. 4. Too many. His body shudders. The silver rings widen, but he does not collapse. He selects. Discards 1. Keeps 3. That is new. Not merely absorbing memory, choosing it. Rusk slams the shield sideways, blocks a spear, hooks the attacker with the cathedral chain, and uses the duelist's footwork to move through a gap no executioner should know how to exploit. The guards stare. One whispers, "What is he?" Rusk does not answer. Conveniently, he still cannot. The technicians activate the cemetery bells. Funeral Index 9 pulses through the manor. Corvin feels the search wave pass over him. The signal seeks active remote sovereignty. It finds almost none. His 6 delayed corpses are operating without live command. Rusk's retained ego muddies classification. Corvin himself is not transmitting through mana at all. The bells scream into a system they cannot understand. Then the first sapper completes its task. A support wedge comes free beneath the courtyard. Stone shifts. 1 bell tilts. Falls. Its iron housing shatters. The second sapper removes another structural brace. Half the monitoring platform drops by 2 feet. Technicians tumble. The second bell snaps from its frame. The third remains active. Corvin does not destroy it. He wants it broadcasting. He wants the directorate listening. Just not to the information they expect. Our dead mage reaches the private chapel. Varric is inside. Mara Ven sits bound near the altar. 4 guards surround her. Varric stands behind them with a loaded hand crossbow. His expression changes when Corvin enters. Not surprise. Something much better. Recognition. He finally understands. "You." Corvin stops. Varric backs toward the altar. No. The dead necromancer says nothing. Varric's eyes move toward the courtyard, toward the surviving bell, then back. "You were alive." Wrong. Corvin speaks for the first time. No. That one word does more damage than a speech. Varric's face empties. Mara Ven looks up. Her eyes settle on Corvin's execution scar. She understands faster. Old burial registrars are apparently difficult people to impress. Varric raises the crossbow. "I watched your head fall." Corvin takes another step. "Correct. You burned." "Incorrect." Varric fires. The bolt enters Corvin's chest. He looks down, then pulls it out. Varric finally experiences the exact realization Corvin has spent days engineering. He did kill the necromancer. That was the mistake. The 4 guards attack. Corvin does not need them dead. He needs Varric alive. So Rusk handles the left side. Corvin takes the right. Grave Echo activates again through a guard's death-stained sword. This time, he uses the synchronized movement deliberately. 3 patterns combine into one sequence. Parry. Shoulder shift. Weapon trap. Disarm. No wasted movement. The first guard loses his sword. The second loses balance. Rusk binds the third with the cathedral chain. The fourth sees the others fall and simply stops. Smartest man in the room. Corvin reaches Mara. He cuts the ropes. She rubs her wrists, then looks at his ruined face. That is inconvenient. Rusk pauses. Even Corvin needs half a second to process that response. Mara stands. "You looked better at your execution." Corvin hands her Varric's signed order. She reads it. Her mouth hardens. Good. She is alive. Now the reveal from the directorate can become leverage instead of mystery. Corvin places the blue ceramic token in her hand. Malin roar. Mara's expression changes instantly. Varric sees it. So does Corvin. She knows. "Where did you get this?" "Treasury archive." Mara looks at the symbol, then at Rusk. Her eyes narrow at the mark beneath his throat, and suddenly she understands something Corvin does not. Funeral index. Varric interrupts. What does she know? Nobody answers him. He raises his voice. What does she know? That is where the trap finally closes. Because Varric now realizes every action he took to protect himself has brought Corvin directly to a living witness the directorate wanted erased. The forged document made him investigate the Ninth Ossuary. The investigation connected him to directorate technology. Those purchases created financial records. The records exposed Bram. Bram's network revealed the continuity directorate. The directorate's cleanup effort exposed Mara, and Varric's own execution order told Corvin exactly how valuable she was. One fake piece of paper. Everything after that was Varric. Corvin turns toward him. The authorization beneath the ninth ossuary. Varric freezes. It was false. Silence. Then his face collapses. Not physically, conceptually. Corvin continues. The command mechanism was false. Varric grips the altar rail. The transfer clause was false. His breathing accelerates. The archive number's real. That makes it worse. Varric stares. Corvin finally gives him the connection he needs. You trusted it because you wanted the dead soldiers. Varric says nothing. You funded the expeditions. Nothing. You contacted Kest. Nothing. You brought the directorate into the open. Varric's mouth moves. No sound. There it is. The great pivot. The man who believed he eliminated the threat finally sees the shape of the weak behind him. He was not hunting Corvin's hidden plan. He was walking through one. Varric grabs the altar rail harder. You planned all of this? Corvin looks at the surviving cemetery bell in the courtyard, still broadcasting. The directorate is listening for necromantic activity. Let them listen to Varric. Corvin steps closer. Not all of it. That answer terrifies him more, because it means Corvin adapted, again and again. The dead necromancer was not following a perfect script. He was simply impossible to exhaust, impossible to frighten, impossible to pressure into haste. Varric backs away, then says the first desperate thing that comes to mind. I can give you a Lyra. Corvin remains still. Kest too. The first name on the ledger is bargaining with the second and third. Predictable. I have letters, payment routes. Names. Now useful. Rusk closes the chapel doors. Mara watches without sympathy. Varric looks at Corvin. I can give you the directorate. Corvin's ruined jaw has already begun stitching itself closed with necrotic fibers. His voice comes out flat. No. Varric goes pale. Corvin looks toward the documents hidden behind the altar. One dead Sorn servant already opened the compartment before they arrived. Copies, correspondence, payment records, custodian references. Everything Varric thought he might trade. Corvin has it. That is the actual payoff. He never needed Varric's cooperation. He only needed Varric frightened enough to gather all his secrets in one place. Fourth stage. Consequence. Outside the manor, royal investigators reach the gates. Tax officers arrive behind them. Then War Ministry inspectors. Then 2 legal clerks carrying emergency seizure orders. Corvin does not summon them. The paperwork did. The trap finishes itself. Varric hears pounding at the outer doors. His guards look toward him. Then toward Corvin. Nobody knows whom they are supposed to protect anymore. Mara walks past the altar and picks up Varric's execution order. Keep this. She hands it back to Corvin. You will want the original. Corvin takes it. Then he turns toward Varric. The obituary ledger opens silently inside his mind. The first name remains, not crossed out. Not yet. Varric has lost wealth, authority, secrecy, protection, but the name is still unresolved. Corvin does not want him dead tonight. The directorate is still listening. A corpse rising from Sorn Manor would confirm too much. So he leaves Varric alive inside the ruins of his own position. For now, Rusk looks disappointed. Corvin notices. Later, the executioner accepts that. Mostly. They leave through the chapel crypt with Mara between them. Behind them, royal investigators breach the manor. Varric starts shouting about treason. Nobody listens the way they did yesterday. Above the city, Funeral Index 9 rings again. This time, Rusk stops beneath the sound. The black channels under his skin flare across both shoulders. His eyes fill with overlapping movement patterns. Dozens. He does not collapse. He selects 3 and discards the rest. Archive vessel is getting closer. Corvin watches the change. Then Mara sees it. Her face goes completely still. That should not exist. Corvin turns toward her. She looks at Rusk, then at the blue custodian token in her hand. Malin Roar's intake record was not about his death. A pause. It was about what the directorate failed to remove afterward. That gives Corvin the next piece, not the answer, a direction. Perfect. He opens the hidden passage beneath the chapel. Rusk enters first. Mara follows. Corvin takes one final look back towards Sorn Manor as officials pour through rooms containing evidence Varric collected with his own hands. Then our undead necromancer closes the crypt door and returns beneath the city. The first name on the list is no longer powerful. Now it is merely waiting. Corvin Vale spends the night before the Continuity Directorate's final move sewing another dead man's chest open. Quietly, precisely. Rusk lies on the central operating table beneath the abandoned morgue while black geometric channels pulse underneath his skin. Mara Ven sits 3 feet away eating onion stew from a chipped ceramic bowl. The smell is aggressively alive. Butter, pepper, caramelized onion, a little burnt flour from the bottom of the pot. Rusk cannot eat. Corvin has no reason to. Mara eats enough for all 3 of them. If either of you starts complaining about the smell, she says, tearing bread in half. You can both die again. Rusk slowly turns his head toward Corvin. Corvin looks back. Neither reacts. Mara points her spoon at them. That was a joke. Rusk's ruined mouth moves. Barely. Something suspiciously close to amusement appears in the silver rings around his pupils. Corvin returns to the incision across Rusk's sternum. There is work to do. Part 7 proved the convergence principle works. It also proved the current method will eventually tear Rusk apart. The black channels beneath his skin are not random mutations. They are storage pathways. Every time grave memory absorbs a movement pattern, those pathways preserve part of the structure long enough for Rusk to choose whether to keep or discard it. The problem is collision. A swordsman's balance wants one spinal alignment. A shield captain wants another. An executioner's shoulder mechanics assume a heavier weapon. A prison restraint specialist prioritizes joint control rather than lethal force. Stack enough patterns at once, and the body receives contradictory instructions. The directorate solves that problem by deleting the person, strip identity, compress skill, store function, efficient, monstrous. Corvin chooses a more complicated route. Preserve Rusk. Separate the channels. Let him decide. Our dead mage slides 3 thin bone needles beneath the black lines around Rusk's ribs. Each needle comes from a different corpse. A surgeon, a battlefield signal officer, a dueling instructor. Not because the bone itself contains power, because each one carries a physical pattern Corvin already understands through grave echo. He uses those patterns like measuring tools. The surgeon gives precision. The signal officer gives synchronization. The duelist gives timing. Corvin links them through the convergence frame. Not full memories, only selected movements. One pathway at a time. Rusk grips the edge of the table. No pain response. Still, his retained ego understands what is happening well enough to remain completely still. Corvin sends the first pattern through. The black channel beneath Rusk's left rib flares, then forks. Wrong. Corvin stops. He adjusts the iron ring by 2 degrees, moves 1 bone needle lower. Repeats. This time, the channel forms a clean loop around the rib cage instead of crossing toward the spine. Good. The second pathway goes to the shoulder. The third descends along the forearm. For 3 hours, Corvin does nothing remotely impressive. No armies rise. No buildings collapse. No villains scream. He simply changes angles by fractions and tests one movement at a time. That is how final weapons are actually built. Not through inspiration. Through eliminating tiny failures until nothing important remains. Mara finishes her stew. Then she washes the bowl herself. The water pump squeaks every second turn. The sound repeats through the underground chamber while Corvin works. Ordinary. Almost peaceful. Rusk looks toward the wash basin, then toward Mara. She notices. What? He raises one hand, makes a clumsy stirring motion. Mara stares. You want stew? Rusk shakes his head, points at her, then at the pot, then makes the stirring motion again. Corvin understands first. He remembers cooking. Mara stops. Rusk points at the black saber leaning against the table, then at his temple. Grave memory, a dead pattern. Someone connected to the saber knew how to cook. Apparently, combat equipment collects stranger histories than military archives admit. Mara walks back to the pot. Hands, Rusk the wooden spoon. Fine. The executioner sits up carefully, chest still open. Corvin allows it. For now. Rusk stands beside the stove. He holds the spoon. Pauses. Then begins scraping the bottom of the pot in a smooth, circular motion. Too smooth. The movement belongs to someone who did this thousands of times. He adds water, a pinch of salt. Uses the flat of the spoon to crush the remaining onion against the side. Mara watches. You stole someone's soup technique. Rusk gives one small shrug. That is apparently a yes. Corvin observes the movement. Not the cooking, the selection. Rusk has dozens of recent patterns inside him. He deliberately chooses one harmless memory. No overload, no involuntary switching. No combat trigger. That is more important than the stew. Archive vessel is not merely increasing capacity. Rusk is developing indexing, voluntary retrieval. Corvin closes the incision across his sternum with corpse thread. You chose that one deliberately, Rusk nods. Without contact. Another nod. Corvin looks at the black channels beneath the skin. That solves half the problem. The final technique no longer needs Rusk to touch a death-saturated object during battle. He can preload patterns, store them, call specific components when needed. Now Corvin needs to do the same, not internally. His corpse does not possess Rusk's evolving archive structure. But his authority can connect to Rusk. That means Rusk can store, Corvin can synchronize. One archive, one conductor, multiple dead functions. The concept finally becomes clean. Mara tastes the reheated stew. Her eyebrows rise. Rusk watches her. Better, she admits. The executioner looks extremely satisfied for someone technically without functioning facial circulation. Corvin turns back toward the frame. Again, Rusk sighs. A completely unnecessary gesture from a dead man. Mara points at him with the spoon. That one was definitely personality. Rusk lies back down. The next test uses 3 stored patterns. The shield captain's brace, the duelist's pivot, the executioner's downward weight transfer. Corvin does not ask Rusk to perform them separately. He routes them through Grave Echo. Extracts only compatible pieces, knee stabilization, hip rotation, shoulder drop, then recombines them into one movement neither original owner ever performed. Rusk stands. The black channels pulse. He steps forward, turns, braces, swings the execution axe. The weapon stops 1 inch above the stone floor. No tremor, no structural conflict, no wasted motion. The air cracks from displaced force. Mara's hanging coat falls from a wall peg. She looks at it, then at Corvin. That was expensive masonry you almost destroyed. It is abandoned. It still had a floor. Rusk lowers the axe. Corvin records the result. 3 source convergence, stable, selected physical components only. No full memory bleed, no identity interference. He increases the load. 4 patterns. Failure. Rusk's elbow locks halfway through. Corvin stops immediately. Adjusts. Instead of adding a 4th complete source, he extracts 1 component from it. A mortuary worker's finger precision. Nothing else. The combined sequence works. That is the answer. The limit is not number of corpses. The limit is number of competing intentions. Separate motion into components and compatibility rises dramatically. Footwork from one, timing from another, grip from a third, structural reading from a fourth. 1 new action built from dead specialists. Grave Echo is no longer copying the dead, it is composing them. Corvin names the completed mechanism Grave Concordance, a technique assembled from the thing the Directorate fundamentally misunderstands. They believe function becomes cleaner after personality is removed. Corvin has discovered the opposite can also be true. Separate functions carefully enough, and individuality does not need to be destroyed at all. Rusk becomes proof. The final combat application becomes obvious. The Directorate's command devices are built from index death patterns. If Corvin can touch that architecture again, Grave Concordance may let him read its components in real time, not merely resist them, disassemble them, then redirect compatible functions through Rusk's archive vessel. Dangerous. Specific. Exactly the kind of technique worth taking into St. Orden's Cathedral. Mara hears the location and stops stirring. No. Corvin looks at her. No, he repeats. That cathedral was modified long before your execution. She sets the spoon down. You saw 1 collection chamber. There are more. Corvin waits. Mara wipes her hands on a cloth and walks toward the evidence table. She picks up the blue custodian token. Then Malin roars copied intake notation. Her finger taps 1 faded line. Roar did not die during indexing. Corvin already suspects that. Mara continues. They removed his patterns in stages. She points at another notation. First pass motor authority, another. Second pass corpse, command segmentation. Then the final line. Third pass sovereign residue. Rusk's eyes narrow. Corvin looks closer. The phrase matches the Directorate terminology used at the 9th ossuary. Residual sovereign authority. The thing their machine detected. The thing Funeral Index 9 is searching for. Mara places the paper flat. Malin Roar survived the first 2 extractions. How long? 9 days. Corvin says nothing. Long enough to speak. That matters. Mara pulls an old burial registrar's pencil from behind her ear. She writes 3 words on the edge of the copied page. Do not complete third. Corvin looks at her. His words? My supervisor's note. Mara's expression hardens. Roar kept repeating it. Corvin studies the phrase, not a warning against pain, not a plea. A technical warning. Why should the 3rd extraction matter? Mara answers before he asks. After the 2nd pass, every corpse in the intake ward started turning toward him. Rusk slowly straightens. Bound corpses? Corvin asks. No necromancer was controlling them. There it is. A predecessor. Not identical to Corvin, but closer than expected. Malin Roar may have reached some version of post-mana death authority while still technically alive, or while being dismantled. The Directorate discovered sovereign residue decades ago. They failed to understand it completely. Then Corvin died and became the perfected version by accident. The revelation from Part 5 gains another layer without becoming a new mystery from nowhere. Continuity, not coincidence. The Directorate did not invent the architecture from nothing. They harvested fragments of previous people who touched the same underlying law. Corvin adjusts the final objective. Destroying the cathedral network is not enough. He needs the 3rd pass archive. If Roar's sovereign residue was stored instead of erased, The directorate may possess the oldest working map of the same principle keeping Corvin active. That information cannot remain in their hands. Mara watches him reach for the city map. You are still going. Yes, naturally. She takes the pencil back, then circles Saint Ordan's eastern foundation. Then do not use the public crypt entrance. Corvin looks at the mark. Mara circles another location. Old plague transfer tunnel. She draws a line beneath the cathedral. The directorate sealed the visible entrance 40 years ago. Rusk leans over the table. Mara taps a drainage route. They forgot this one because the river changed course. Corvin studies the path. Direct access beneath the lower indexing chambers. Useful. Mara starts gathering papers. Corvin stops her with one hand. You are not coming. She looks at him. That sounded almost protective. It is logistical. Of course. Your information is more useful outside the cathedral. Mara stares for several seconds. Then accepts the answer. Not emotionally. Practically. She reaches into her coat and gives Corvin a small brass key. Old, worn. One side carries the insignia of a burial registrar. Lower intake records. He takes it. If they never changed the lock, they did. Corvin looks at her. Mara smiles. The old key does not open the door. Rusk tilts his head. It opens the emergency body lift behind it. That is much better. She returns to the stove. No farewell speech. No request that Corvin survive. Instead, she puts a lid over the remaining stew and says, if the cathedral burns down, do not bring the ruins here. That is apparently affection in burial registrar language. Corvin stores the key. Rusk picks up the black saber, then pauses. He removes the crooked scrap of cloth from his old coat, the first sleeve he failed to repair. He folds it, places it on the morgue shelf beside Mara's bowl, a small object, no tactical value. No necromantic function, he keeps it anyway, Corvin notices. Says nothing. Rusk fastens his repaired coat. The black channels beneath his skin have stopped flickering. Now they hold steady. Wrist, forearm, shoulder, ribs, chest. A complete network, not evolved, ready. That distinction matters. The final trigger still has to come from indexed death patterns inside the directorate architecture. Saint Ordan will provide plenty. Meanwhile, above them, the opposition places its final piece. Inside the cathedral's restricted nave, Elira Dane stands beneath funeral index 9's central bell. Bram Kest waits beside her, sweating through an expensive collar. The unknown elder from the previous meeting finally steps into full light. Director Oren Vask. No grand title. No robe covered in symbols. Just a thin old man wearing a gray administrative coat and the expression of someone reviewing inventory. 3 custodian tokens rest on the table before him. First, second, third. Elira's is one of them. Bram's is not. That tells Bram exactly where he stands. Vask opens a steel case. Inside rests a black plate marked with Corvin Vale's name. Blank beneath the heading. Waiting. The Sorn operation failed, Bram says. Vask closes the case. The Sorn operation succeeded. Elira looks at him. Vask continues. Vale acted. Not visibly enough. He extracted Ven. A pause. He disabled monitoring without destroying the network. Another. He is thinking. That concerns them more than an undead army would. Vask turns toward the central bell. Expand funeral index 9 to full city saturation. Elira's jaw tightens. That will disturb every burial ground in the capital. Yes, thousands of residual patterns. Yes, Bram finally speaks. People will notice. Director Vask looks at him. People notice disasters. They rarely notice infrastructure. Then he gives the final order. Prepare the third pass archive. Elira goes still. Even she dislikes that. Vask does not care. If Vale is what I believe he is, the archive will force a response. The directorate begins moving its last piece. Below the city, Corvin finishes moving his. The convergence frame is dismantled into portable sections. One ring attaches beneath Rusk's coat. 3 bone conductors fit along his ribs. The cathedral chain wraps around his waist. The black saber carries the first stored pattern. The execution axe carries the second. 4 additional death-saturated objects provide specific movement components rather than full memories. No unknown power. No sudden gift. Everything on Rusk's body has already been tested. Everything Corvin intends to use has already failed at least once somewhere safer. That is preparation. Corvin himself carries almost nothing. The brass registrar key, the obituary ledger inside his mind, Varric signed execution order, and the fragment of blue ceramic marked third custodian. At the mouth of the plague tunnel, Mara stands behind them holding a lantern. Warm yellow light hits 2 dead figures from behind. Rusk enters first, then stops, turns. Mara tosses him a wrapped packet. He catches it. Inside is bread. Completely useless to him. Rusk looks at her. For later, she says. He looks at Corvin. Corvin offers no explanation. Rusk puts the bread inside his coat anyway. Again, no tactical value. Again, retained personality. Good. Mara raises the lantern. Try not to get indexed. Rusk lifts 2 fingers in acknowledgement. Corvin steps into the tunnel. No oath, no dramatic promise, no anger. There is simply a job unfinished beneath St. Ordan's cathedral. The first name on his list is already broken. The second stands inside the Directorate's central operation. The third is helping finance it. And somewhere beneath all of them waits the archive containing the remains of another necromancer who discovered that death authority does not end where mana does. Corvin adjusts the black iron connector on Rusk's shoulder. The channels beneath the executioner's skin answer with one steady pulse. Grave Concordance is ready. Archive Vessel is waiting for its final trigger. Ahead, Funeral Index 9 begins its full city broadcast. Every burial bell in the capital rings at once. Corvin opens the rusted plague gate and walks toward the sound. Every burial bell in the capital rings at once. St. Ordan's Cathedral answers by waking the dead beneath it, not raising them. That would be simple. The Continuity Directorate does something much worse. It makes them remember how they died. Corvin Vale feels the first wave before he reaches the end of the plague tunnel. Thousands of compressed death patterns pour through Funeral Index 9, execution reflexes, surgical cuts, battlefield instincts, restraint techniques, mage gestures. Necromantic commands stripped of their original owners and compressed into pure function. The tunnel walls vibrate. Rusk stops beside him. Silver fills the executioner's eyes. Black channels beneath his skin ignite from throat to fingertips. Corvin catches his shoulder before the first overload hits. Select. Rusk's jaw locks. The broadcast intensifies. More patterns hammer through him. A cavalry officer, a prison warden, 3 duelists, a corpse engineer, 2 executioners, a surgeon, someone trained to break fingers without damaging the wrist, someone else trained to put those fingers back together afterward. The Directorate has been collecting useful dead people for generations, and tonight it broadcasts the archive like bait. Rusk trembles, then the shaking stops. One pattern disappears, then another, then 10. The silver rings contract. Selection, not resistance. Control. Good. Corvin releases him. They continue. The plague tunnel ends beneath an iron maintenance hatch. Mara's brass registrar key does not fit the lock, exactly as promised. Corvin inserts it into a narrow mechanism beside the wall instead. Something massive shifts overhead. An emergency corpse lift descends through darkness. Still functional after 40 years. Government infrastructure occasionally deserves praise. Corvin and Rusk step onto the platform. The lift rises. When the doors open, St. Ordan's lower intake ward waits beyond them. Blue tile, steel tables, drainage channels, gray gloves hanging from hooks. Rusk freezes. The room from his fragmented memory. He was here, not metaphorically, not through someone else's weapon. Here. The executioner's hand closes around his black saber. Corvin steps past him. No speech. Rusk follows. That is enough. 3 Directorate technicians spot them. One reaches for an alarm. Corvin touches the corpse trolley beside him. A preserved body underneath the sheet rises and catches the technician's wrist. The cemetery bells scream immediately. Funeral Index 9 finds the active command. Good. Corvin wants it to. The alarm begins anyway. Red lamps flare through the lower ward. Steel doors slam shut. Above them, Director Oren Vask gets exactly what he wanted. Confirmation. Corvin Vale is inside the cathedral. The entire Directorate architecture pivots toward him. That is when the first stage begins. Receive the blow. The floor opens, not dramatically. Efficiently, sections of blue tile retract, revealing black metal channels beneath. Funerary equations illuminate in sequence. The same architecture Corvin touched through Merrick's wound now covers the entire chamber. The cathedral itself is the machine. A command pulse hits. Every corpse in the intake ward turns toward Corvin, not his. The Directorate's. Dozens of preserved bodies rise from steel drawers. Each one carries indexed movement patterns. A dead swordsman attacks with a healer's anatomical precision. A former priest uses prison restraint footwork. A corpse with both eyes removed moves like a dueling champion. They are not people anymore. That part was removed. Only useful pieces remain. Corvin takes the first blade through his shoulder. A second corpse breaks his wrist. A third drives him into the wall. Rusk intercepts 2 more and immediately gets overwhelmed. The executioner blocks one sword, then another. A corpse engineer changes grip halfway through the exchange and uses a completely different combat pattern. Rusk misreads it. A hammer caves in his chest. He hits the floor. The convergence ring beneath his coat bends. Directorate dead surround him. Corvin reaches toward them. Authority rejected. The cathedral architecture sits above his command level. Same mechanism as the portable device. Except this one spans the entire lower complex. No range gap, no easy escape. A voice comes through brass speakers hidden in the walls. Director Vask, Corvin Vale. Our dead mage rips the sword from his shoulder. Vask continues. No heartbeat. Another corpse slashes Corvin's throat open. No mana. Corvin catches its arm. Persistent motor function. A hammer breaks 2 fingers. Independent sovereign authority. Corvin throws the attacker backward. Director Vask sounds almost satisfied. Exceptional. There it is. Not hatred. Not fear. Inventory assessment. Vask never wanted to defeat a monster. He wanted to catalog one. Corvin's body takes more damage. Shoulder dislocated. 2 ribs shattered. Left knee cracked. Neck partially opened again. None of it creates pain. But structure still matters. Movement slows. Rusk rises behind him. One side of the executioner's chest is crushed. The black channels flicker erratically. 20 Directorate corpses advance. Then Elira Dane enters. White armor this time. Sunbrass spear. Second name on the ledger. She walks through the dead formation without looking at them. Her gaze stays on Corvin. You should have stayed a corpse. Corvin's ruined throat repairs enough for speech. I did. Elira's expression hardens. Then she attacks. Fast. Much faster than the soldiers at Sorn Manor. The spear crosses 20 feet in a blink. Corvin turns. Too slow. The blade punches through his sternum and pins him against the wall. Radiant script activates along the shaft. His flesh burns. Still no mana to suppress. Elira already knows that. So she twists. Bone cracks. Physical destruction. Smart. She pulls the spear free and strikes again. Corvin loses part of his left hand. Rusk charges her. She pivots and drives the butt of the spear through his jaw. The executioner crashes into a steel table. The Directorate corpses close around him. For several seconds, the 2 undead are simply being dismantled. Exactly what Vask wants. Second stage. Read. Corvin watches everything. Elira's spear does not carry ordinary death residue. The weapon has been sterilized repeatedly. No grave echo. Intentional. The Directorate corpses change techniques through command bursts sent along the floor architecture, not individually. In clusters. Every 6 seconds, the black channels beneath the tiles flare. New patterns arrive. The cathedral does not contain one archive. It routes one, and all routes converge upward. Third pass storage, somewhere above the intake ward. Rusk sees it too. Not the architecture, the pattern transitions. His silver eyes track each change. 6 seconds, new stance, 6 seconds, new stance, 6 seconds, new stance. Corvin catches Elira's spear with his remaining hand. The blade burns through his palm. He holds it anyway. 6. Elira frowns. Rusk understands. The next pulse comes. He moves during the transition. Not before, not after. Between patterns. For a fraction of a second, every Directorate corpse is empty. Previous function discarded. Next function not fully loaded. Rusk drives the execution axe through the floor. Black tile shatters. 1 command channel breaks. 4 corpses freeze. There. A weakness. Not in the dead. In the switching architecture. Corvin releases the spear. Elira strikes. He takes the hit through the abdomen. Uses the contact to move closer. She expects him to protect structural integrity. Living fighters do that automatically. Corvin no longer needs to. He sacrifices the torso position and catches her armored wrist. Then Rusk attacks the floor again. Second channel. Broken. More corpses freeze. Director Vask's voice returns. Increase broadcast density. Bad choice. Funeral Index 9 opens fully. The entire cathedral rings. Death patterns pour downward. Hundreds. Then thousands. Rusk screams without a functioning voice. The sound comes out as a torn metallic rasp. He drops the axe. Black channels explode across his face. The convergence ring under his coat glows white-hot. Too much. Corvin reaches for him. Rusk slaps the hand away. Deliberately. Then plants both palms on the floor. The indexed broadcast enters him directly. Duelists, healers, corpse engineers, executioners, battle mages, morticians, commanders, locksmiths, sappers. Thousands of fragments. The Directorate expects overload. Instead, Rusk starts discarding. 1, 5, 20, 100. Patterns tear through him and vanish. He keeps only components. Foot placement, grip correction, shoulder alignment, visual tracking, structural timing, joint control. Nothing else. No personalities to destroy. No full identities to overwrite. Just selected physical function. The black channels stop looking like wounds. They become an organized lattice. Chest, spine, arms, neck. Behind the silver rings of his eyes, something settles. The system finally speaks. Archive vessel complete. Retained ego stable. Pattern capacity expanded. Independent selection authorized. Rusk stands, not as a different creature. That would be easier. He is still Garen Rusk, same ruined throat, same execution scar, same repaired coat, same absurd piece of bread Mara stuffed into his pocket. Only now thousands of dead functions can pass through him without deciding who he is. That is the evolution. The Directorate spent generations trying to create storage by removing the person. Rusk becomes storage because the person refuses to disappear. He reaches for the black saber. The blade leaves its sheath. 5 movement components align, not 5 complete techniques, 5 pieces. The result belongs to none of the original dead. Rusk crosses the chamber. First corpse loses its weapon. Second loses both knees. Third is thrown into the command channel. Fourth gets pinned beneath a steel table. No wasted motion, no killing required. The Directorate dead are already dead. Destroying them proves nothing. Breaking the infrastructure does. Corvin sees the opening. Third stage, ignition. Grave Concordance activates at full scale. Not through a single sword. Not through one corpse. Through Rusk. Archive vessel becomes the storage layer. Corvin becomes the conductor. The first pattern Corvin selects is the Sapper's structural reading tested in the 9th ossuary. The second is the duelist timing first borrowed through Grave Echo. The third is the shield captain's rotational brace refined inside the morgue. The fourth is a mortuary worker's finger precision. 4 old pieces. 1 new sequence. Corvin places his damaged hand against the cathedral floor. Grave Concordance reads the funerary architecture. Not the content, the construction, where command flows, where patterns switch, where sovereign priority enters. Where the third pass archive feeds the network, the building becomes understandable, not completely. Enough. A route forms inside his awareness. Up, behind the eastern apse, 3 levels, central bell chamber. Below it, 1 sealed archive. Corvin looks at Rusk. No words. Rusk sees the route through their bond. They move. Elira blocks the exit. Her spear comes down. Rusk intercepts. The sunbrass blade slices through his forearm. He does not stop. The severed hand hits the floor, still gripping the saber. Rusk kicks the weapon upward with the duelist timing. Catches it in his other hand with a mortician's precision. Then uses the shield captain's brace to take Elira's next strike without losing ground. She finally looks unsettled. Not because Rusk is stronger, because he is selecting counters faster than the Directorate can broadcast them. She changes spear form. Rusk changes with her. She switches to a short grip. He selects restraint mechanics. She uses a sweeping strike. He selects cavalry balance. Nothing copied wholesale. Everything recomposed. Corvin walks past them. Elira sees him. Tries to disengage. Rusk wraps the cathedral chain around her spear. The same chain once used to restrain Corvin before execution. Now it locks the St. Martial's weapon to a broken steel table. Efficient symmetry. Corvin reaches the stairwell. Directorate corpses pour downward. He touches the first one's face. Grave Concordance strips only its loaded movement components. No identity exists to harm. The corpse becomes still. The second arrives. Same. Third. Fourth. Corvin climbs through a corridor of dead bodies, losing borrowed functions faster than the archive can replace them. Director Vask stops speaking. That silence is useful. The central bell chamber opens above. Bram Kest is inside. Third name. The treasurer stands beside the primary control console with sweat soaking his collar. Director Vask stands at the third pass archive. Thin. Calm. Gray coat perfectly straight. Between them rises Funeral Index 9, not 1 bell. 9 concentric iron frames descending through the cathedral tower. Every frame carries black plates, thousands of them. Index dead. At the center sits a sealed cylinder marked with Malin Roar's name. There. Corvin stops. Vask watches him stare at it. That is what you came for. Corvin steps closer. Bram backs away. Vask does not. Roar reached the threshold before you. Corvin looks at the cylinder. Then you killed him. We preserved the useful portion. Wrong answer. Not morally. Mechanically. Vask gestures toward Funeral Index 9. Everything here exists because individuals are temporary. Corvin touches the nearest black plate. Your mistake. Vask's eyes narrow. You think personality matters? No. That answer surprises him. Corvin continues. Choice does. Below them, Rusk tears the cathedral chain free. Elira's spear hits the floor. The archive vessel begins climbing. Vask hears it. Finally, something like urgency enters his posture. He activates the third pass archive. The cylinder containing Malin Roar opens. Funeral Index 9 detonates with sovereign authority. Every corpse in the cathedral turns at once, not toward Corvin, away from him. For 1 second, the dead kneel. Then the entire network tries to overwrite his authority directly. Not his corpses. Him. A command enters the same underlying structure, keeping Corvin active. SUBMIT, priority. Corvin stops moving. Bram laughs from pure relief. Vask watches. The command repeats. Submit priority. Corvin's hand lowers. His head tilts. The Directorate has finally reached the core mechanism. Fourth stage begins. Consequence. Vask takes one step forward. Every system has a hierarchy. Corvin looks at him. Correct. Then Grave Concordance opens through Malin Roar's sovereign pattern. Not against it. With it. Roar's residue contains the original command architecture. The Directorate stripped away his identity but preserved the structure. Exactly what Corvin needs. He reads the ancient sovereign sequence. Rusk reaches the bell chamber at the same moment. Archive vessel connects. For the first time, Grave Concordance has access to 3 layers at once. Corvin's posthumous sovereignty. Rusk's selective archive. Roar's preserved command structure. Old. Current. Artificially stored. The pattern aligns. Corvin does not overpower Funeral Index 9. He changes who the system recognizes as dead authority. Every black plate in the cathedral flickers. Thousands of indexed functions detach from the Directorate network. Not destroyed. Released. The bells stop. Absolute silence hits St. Ordan's Cathedral. Then every corpse beneath it turns toward Director Vask. Bram stops laughing. Alira reaches the chamber entrance behind Rusk. Her face goes white. Vask looks at the dead surrounding him, then at Corvin. For the first time, the administrator stops looking at an asset. He sees a failure large enough to swallow the institution built around preventing it. Corvin removes Malin Roar's cylinder from the archive. No rage, no triumph. Those died with his pulse. But one thing remains that the Directorate never successfully categorized. Preference. He prefers Rusk to remain Rusk. He prefers Mara alive. He prefers dead people not be reduced to tools merely because powerful institutions find ownership convenient. And he very strongly prefers deciding what happens to Corvin Vale himself. That is enough. Rusk steps beside him. Archive vessel stable. Alira lowers her spear. Not surrender. Calculation. Bram tries the side door. It locks before he reaches it. A dead clerk closes it from the other side. Director Vask finally retreats one step. Corvin opens the obituary ledger. 7 names remain. The second and third stand in front of him. The first is waiting under royal investigation. The Directorate page behind them is no longer blank. One name writes itself across the top. Oren Vask. Corvin closes the ledger. Nobody dies yet. That comes after records are read. After the archive is opened, after every roll becomes clear, eternity does not reward rushing. Our undead necromancer removes Funeral Index, 9 central control plate, hands Malin Roar's cylinder to Rusk, and orders every door in St. Ordan's Cathedral sealed from the inside. By sunrise, St. Ordan's Cathedral belongs to the dead, not symbolically, not politically. Literally, every door is sealed from inside. Every Directorate corpse stands motionless beneath Corvin Vale's authority. Funeral Index 9 has stopped broadcasting. And in the central archive chamber, centuries of stolen death patterns sit exposed for the first time since the Continuity Directorate learned how to turn people into equipment. Director Oren Vask is still alive. That is deliberate. Saint Marshal Alira Dane is alive too. So is High Treasurer Bram Kest. Rusk stands beside the third pass archive with Malin Roar's cylinder held beneath one arm. The black channels of archive vessel have settled into thin, permanent lines beneath his skin. No flickering, no overload. No borrowed identity trying to crawl into his movements. He is stable. More importantly, he is still Garen Rusk. Corvin opens the Directorate records. The work takes hours. No dramatic interrogation. No screaming confessions. Documents are better. Documents do not suddenly remember convenient lies. The archive contains 71 years of continuity operations, execution, authorizations, acquisition orders, treasury routes, cathedral intake reports, experimental failures, custodian appointments, and finally, the complete file on Corvin Vale. Selection begins 11 months before his arrest. Not 3 days before his execution. 11 months. That matters. His death was never simply retaliation for becoming politically inconvenient. The Directorate noticed anomalies in his necromantic command structure during the Ash March campaigns. Corvin repeatedly controlled more corpses with less mana than accepted theory allowed, not infinitely, not while alive, but efficiently enough to make someone curious. So they watched him, then they classified him. Potential sovereign carrier, third pass candidate. Varric Sorn never knew the full terminology. He only knew the Directorate would protect him if he removed Corvin from power. That promise made him ambitious. The Directorate supplied opportunities. Varric supplied motive. Alira supplied access. Bram supplied money. Othric Pell falsified the mana records. Renwald Tain supplied witnesses. Selkavor supervised the torture designed to damage Corvin's core without destroying the nervous system. Joran Voss forged the king's seal. 7 names, 7 functions. One murder disguised as state necessity. Corvin finishes reading. No anger appears. He does not need it. The record is sufficient. Director Vask watches from the opposite side of the table. You understand now. Corvin closes the file. Yes, Vask mistakes that for agreement. The directorate was correct to select you. Rusk's hand tightens around Malin Roar's cylinder. Corvin remains still. Vask continues. You survived the 3rd threshold. Roar nearly reached it. Others came close. With your condition documented, death sovereignty can finally become reproducible. There it is, even now. Even with Funeral Index 9 dead and the archive compromised, Oren Vask sees Corvin as research material. Corvin opens the obituary ledger. A second page appears. Oren Vask sits beneath the directorate heading. The dead mage looks at him. You preserved functions. Vask nods. We preserved civilization. No. Corvin places one hand against Funeral Index, 9 central plate. You preserved ownership. Then he breaks it, not with raw force. Grave Concordance separates the stored functions from the command hierarchy 1 layer at a time. Thousands of indexed fragments detach. Execution reflexes, battlefield movements, healing procedures, necromantic sequences, all released from directorate priority. The black plates go blank. Not destroyed, emptied. 71 years of accumulated control disappears in less than a minute. Vask finally loses composure. Stop, Corvin continues. You cannot understand what you are erasing. Correct. Another section dies. I do not need it. That is Vask's punishment. Not death, not yet. The man who built his authority by reducing other people to reusable functions is forced to watch every stolen function become unusable. His life's work remains physically intact and absolutely worthless. By noon, royal investigators surround St. Ordon's cathedral. Corvin lets them in. That is the second surprise. He does not flee. He does not raise an army. He hands them records. Living records. Signed payment authorizations, King's Seal forgeries, illegal execution orders, names, dates, custodian designations. The directorate survived because nobody could prove it existed. Now proof occupies 3 archive floors. Bram Kest breaks first. Of course he does. The treasurer starts negotiating before the royal prosecutor finishes reading the first ledger. He offers accounts, names, foreign banking routes, safe houses, everything. Corvin watches from behind a screened mortuary passage while Bram desperately converts loyalty into bargaining material. Third name, Bram's crime was money, so money becomes his sentence. Every hidden account is seized. Every estate purchased through directorate funds is confiscated. Every merchant family he extorted receives documented claims against him. The man who believed coins could erase responsibility discovers that coins are excellent at leaving trails. His name fades from the ledger, not crossed out in blood, simply resolved. Alira receives something different. The Saint Marshal does not bargain. She stands before the military tribunal in full white uniform and admits authorizing Corvin's execution. But she tries to frame it as duty. She says the kingdom needed protection. Corvin listens from the rear chamber. Then he sends one document forward, the order she signed before the tribunal ever convened. Execution approved 48 hours before the final hearing. Protection had nothing to do with the verdict. The decision already existed. Illyra sees the paper. Her face changes. Corvin steps into view. The courtroom stops breathing. He still looks dead. Because he is. The execution scar remains around his throat. Illyra stares at him. Corvin repeats the sentence she allowed the cathedral record to describe as lawful. Monocore destroyed before sentencing. He places Selkavor's procedural report beside it. Contracts severed before conviction. Another document. Body reserved before execution. Illyra says nothing. She loses command of the Radiant Host before sunset. Her title is stripped. Her authority is frozen, pending trial. The woman who used sacred military power to make a predetermined killing look lawful is left with no command authority at all. Second name, resolved. Selkavor tries to disappear. That fails. The Inquisitor reaches a border monastery before one of Corvin's delayed dead couriers delivers her own torture logs to the local magistrate. Selka's punishment is painfully specific. She spent years operating behind sealed rooms, trusting that victims without witnesses effectively had no history. Now every interrogation record becomes public evidence. Names of prisoners, unauthorized procedures, false confessions. Corvin does not torture her. He does not need to. He leaves her alive for the people whose silence built her career. Sixth name, resolved. Othric Pell destroys records. He almost succeeds. The court magister burns his laboratory, melts 3 mana ledgers, and claims the measurements proving Corvin's instability were lost. Unfortunately for Othric, Corvin already recovered the original calibration plates from beneath the military archive. The falsification is mathematical, clear, embarrassing. Othric loses his license, position, research chair, and every royal patent attached to the fraudulent records. The man who altered measurements to manufacture guilt is destroyed by unaltered measurements. Fourth name, resolved. Duke Renwald Tane tries politics. Naturally, he claims his witnesses acted independently. Then 3 witnesses testify that Renwald paid them. One produces the purse. Another produces the written rehearsal. The third produces nothing. He simply points toward Renwald in open court and repeats the exact false testimony he was instructed to memorize. Renwald's estates enter seizure litigation. His parliamentary seat disappears. His allies stop recognizing him in public. Fifth name, resolved. Joran Voss lasts the longest. The royal secretary knows documents better than anyone. He knows how to disappear inside procedure. He changes offices, burns correspondence, uses 2 false identities, then leaves the capital. Corvin does not chase him with undead riders. He sends 1 dead postal clerk to the archive beneath the northern relay station. Joran forged the king's seal, but royal seals carry microscopic registry scratches from the press that creates them. The forged order carries a pattern belonging to Joran's private duplicate die. The duplicate is found beneath his country house. He is arrested 3 weeks later. The man who weaponized authenticity is condemned by the smallest authentic detail he failed to reproduce. Seventh name, resolved. Only Varric remains. The first, the man who began the visible chain. By then, Lord Varric Sorn is no longer a lord in practice. His accounts are frozen, his contracts gone. His allies scattered, his manor remains under seizure. The Directorate has publicly denied all connection to him because surviving administrators are already trying to save themselves. He sits in a royal detention chamber wearing plain gray clothing. Corvin visits at night. No guards remain inside. Rusk waits outside the door. Varric hears the footsteps, looks up, and immediately backs against the wall. Weeks ago, he stood beside an execution platform in an immaculate black coat. Now his hands shake. Corvin stops in front of him. Varric tries to speak first. I was used. Yes. The answer seems to give him hope. The Directorate used you, Corvin continues. You still chose. Hope disappears. Varric swallows. I can testify. You will. I can help destroy them. You already did. That hurts more, because it is true. Every greedy decision Varric made exposed another layer. He reaches for the last defense available. I did not know what would happen to you. Corvin looks at him, then repeats the sentence from the execution chamber. Exactly. A necromancer without a pulse is just a corpse waiting to rot. Varric's face goes empty. Corvin steps closer. You were correct about one part. A long silence. You killed me, that is all. No speech about justice. No grand philosophy. No threat about eternity. Varric already understands eternity now. He will spend the remainder of his living years watching trials expose every crime built around his ambition. The crown strips his title permanently. His properties are divided among war pensions he helped freeze. The families of dead soldiers from the Ash March receive the first payments. Sorn Manor becomes a military records annex. And Varric remains alive. That is his sentence. The man who thought death ended problems discovers that survival can be much longer. Corvin opens the obituary ledger one final time that evening. Lord Varric Sorn. The letters fade. The first page becomes blank. All 7 names are resolved. Behind it, the Directorate page remains. Oren Vask is imprisoned beneath royal guard. Several custodians are exposed. Others are missing. The institution is broken inside the capital, not erased everywhere. That distinction matters. Corvin does not pretend otherwise. The world settles. St. Orden's Cathedral reopens months later without Funeral Index 9. The execution chamber beneath it is dismantled. The blue tiles from the Directorate intake ward are removed one by one and catalogued as criminal evidence. The 9th ossuary remains sealed. Its 12,000 soldiers stay dead. Corvin chooses that deliberately. Power does not require constant demonstration. The abandoned municipal morgue changes too. Not much. It remains ugly. The pump still squeaks every second turn. Mara still complains about the stove. Rusk now moves through the rooms with archive vessel fully stabilized, occasionally selecting completely useless dead skills simply because he can. One morning, Mara discovers him using the preserved hand pattern of a pastry cook. The bread is excellent. She pretends not to be impressed. Corvin keeps Malin Roar's cylinder inside a reinforced evidence cabinet, not as a weapon. As a question, because one detail in the third pass record remains unresolved. Roar's sovereign residue was indexed 47 years ago. But one transfer signature attached to the cylinder is dated 12 years later. Someone accessed it long after Rohr died. The custodian authorization is not Vask's, not Alira's, not any name recovered from the Capital Archive. The designation reads only, First Custodian. Corvin places the record beside the surviving blue ceramic fragments. That is the first seed, not a mystery floating in darkness. A specific authorization tied directly to the directorate structure that selected him. Someone higher in the chain existed before Vask. Possibly still does. 3 days later, evidence arrives that confirms the possibility. Far west of the capital, in the fortress city of Dunmere, a continuity archive house burns before royal inspectors can enter it. One witness survives, a railway mortician. He reports seeing a gray-coated administrator leave through the northern gate carrying a steel case. The case bears the circle with 3 descending lines. Second seed. The directorate in the capital is broken. The directorate beyond it is moving. Corvin does not chase immediately. He opens a map, marks Dunmere, then marks 2 other cities appearing repeatedly in directorate transfer records. Rusk stands beside him. Mara places fresh bread on the table. Corvin closes the evidence cabinet containing Malin Rohr's cylinder. Then he removes 1 clean sheet from the obituary ledger. No names yet. That matters. Revenge without evidence is merely appetite. Corvin has no appetite. He has time. He fastens his coat, takes the Dunmere transfer record, and places it inside his travel case. Rusk picks up the black saber. Mara looks at both of them. You are coming back. Corvin pauses at the morgue door, not because emotion stops him, because the statement sounds like a logistical expectation. Yes, Mara nods. Good. He still owes me 3 loaves. Rusk looks offended. That is definitely personality. Corvin opens the door. Morning light enters the old morgue. No dramatic wind. No army waiting outside. Just a road leading west and a directorate record with 1 designation circled twice. The 7 names are gone. The dead necromancer is not. And somewhere beyond Dunmere, the first custodian has just learned that Corvin Vale finally finished page 1.